Chapter 1040. The auras of the elders were quite strong. They had the power of mid-level gods and seemed to have some status. They gathered together and whispered something. From time to time, they stretched out their wrinkled hands and pointed at a few people. Yin Nuashing was bored and looked in the direction they were pointing at. He saw some people of the younger generation. Their auras were not weak, and they were dressed in luxurious robes. They seemed to have come from some power, and their arrogance and nobility were not concealed at all. Yin Nuashing did not pay much attention to them. Instead, he turned his gaze to the other side. However, because of the high angle of view, he could not see the top. He could only sense that there were a few powerful auras hidden on the fourth floor. They were hiding in the corner like them. Many powerful people have suddenly appeared recently. Yin Nuashing suddenly said something. His words floated into the air and drifted out from all directions, causing people to mistakenly think that it was someone beside them who had spoken. Thus, those who heard all nodded subconsciously, as if they had found a new topic to talk about, and began chattering away. Ever since the grand phenomenon occurred in the ultimate plane, many strange people have appeared. Their cultivations are strong, but they keep a low profile and act in a high-profile manner. They attract attention wherever they go. Several people on the Supreme List have been defeated. Not long ago, someone saw Wei Chongting fighting with a mysterious expert in the central area of the ultimate plane. They exchanged thousands of blows, but he was defeated in the end. Isn't Wei Chongting ranked third among the 12 divine pillars? Even he was defeated? Who exactly is that mysterious expert? It's said that he's a reclusive disciple of some big shot. He was alarmed by the phenomenon that day and appeared. As for whether it's true or not, no one can give a clear answer. As Yin Nuashing listened, he said in an imperceptible voice, "What do you mean by some big shot? Just say it clearly." Those are all descendants of gods. Who knows, there might even be the children of gods. Descendants of gods. There was a faint commotion in the cloudy, immortal tower. The conversations were too chaotic, but the contents of their conversations were all similar. Yin Nuashing raised her head and looked at the few obscure energy sources. She discovered that they were emitting faint fluctuations. She couldn't help but grin. Little White glanced at him and said in his soul, "What are you doing? Leading the conversation to the heart of the storm is not your style." "It's nothing." Yin Nuashing shook her head and took a sip of tea. She held the teacup with 4 fingers and sized it up in boredom. Then she said, "The guy who just came out put a bounty on me. I was a little unhappy, so I planned to kill him first. As for who I hit, whether it's related personnel or innocent bystanders, it's none of my business. Anyway, this hit doesn't hurt or itch. I just changed the topic of irrelevant matters. Aren't all the gods in the world hibernating? The gods should have all disappeared. Why?" Everyone was puzzled. Yin Nuashing poured a cup of tea and continued, speaking in a voice that reverberated in the void. "You don't understand? It's said that the grand phenomenon might have been caused by the passing of a powerful person. It's possible that this person was a legendary expert. That's why those guys who were hibernating came out as if they're, but were on fire." Then, the commotion in the cloudy, immortal tower became even more intense. For a moment, thousands of people were discussing loudly. Even the arpeggios were drowned out. "Brother Nuashing, is it okay for you to say this?" Lan Xian looked at him worriedly. Yin Nuashing smiled. "It's okay. Try to recall the voice just now." Lan Xian and Little White were suspicious, but they still tried to recall. In the end, they only remembered the content of this sentence. They couldn't even remember the tone of the person who said it. They couldn't even remember where it came from. They only remembered hearing this sentence. Fuzzy cognition. That's really a good thing. Why didn't I discover it in the past? Yin Nuashing grinned. The commotion in the cloudy, immortal tower lasted for a full 10 minutes. Everyone was talking at once. However, the mysterious voice didn't attract anyone's attention. They felt that it was the words of the people around them. No one investigated whether these words were true or not. During the time when the discussions were going wild, Yin Nuashing kept paying attention to the energy source that was gathered together. In the end, he realized that there was no other movement other than a slight fluctuation at the beginning. He couldn't help but wrinkle his nose. These guys are really good at enduring. The faint arpeggio suddenly fell. The last syllable stopped leisurely. The woman in the fog slowly stood up. She hugged the pipa and took a step forward. However, she was still covered by the fog. No one could see her specific appearance. However, one could vaguely see her graceful body. It was sometimes far and sometimes close. It made people feel as if they couldn't touch her. This kind of hazy feeling made people's hearts throb. In a trance, they seemed to hear her say something. It was hazy and couldn't be heard clearly, but it was clearly imprinted in their minds. It was like the sound of nature. It had some charming syllables. It was like a spring breeze blowing into their hearts and moving their heartstrings. There was a strange magic power that made people believe in it. It was completely out of their control. Moreover, it was like the voice that Yin Nuashing had just made. People would gradually forget it and only remember the content. An ancient artifact of the demon clan. Yin Nuashing was a little surprised. Was this their purpose for walking around the ultimate plane region? Why didn't he believe it? The woman hidden in the fog had just said that the experts of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan had found several very ancient artifacts in the ultimate plane region. They seemed to be array artifacts or weapons. They could also be artifacts that some experts of the Demon Clan had sacrificed. There was a remnant aura of the Demon Clan on them. In any case, they should be related to the Demon Clan. If someone recognized them, they could go and have a talk. Yin Nuashing poked Whitey and raised her chin to the front. Anyway, this was what they said on the surface. She would go along with them. Crash! Objects suddenly fell from the trees around the high platform. They hung in the air and floated up and down. Lights of various colors flashed. They were all holy grade Xian crystals, which made people's eyes light up. There were 6 pieces of holy grade Xian crystals arranged in this way. One of them was only about 1 meter long and wide. It was not in a regular shape. One of them was the smallest, only the size of a head. But these are not the main points. The main points were the things inside the Xian crystals. There were 6 items sealed in the holy grade Xian crystal. One was a pagoda, one was a broken sword, one was a pot-shaped object, and one was a neat pyramid. It was sealed in the smallest Xian crystal. There were 2 other items that had been badly damaged. He couldn't even recognize what they were. The smell of decay and the heaviness of a long time. There's also the smell of a great samsara. Yin Nuashing sniffed and said softly, I don't know the exact time. Anyway, it's not something from this era. Taking into account the interference caused by the holy grade Xian crystals, my conservative guess is that it might be something from 30 years. The Book of Eras speculated that it was between 115 and 100 eras. The span is too big. Everyone, you can come closer and observe these sealed artifacts. The woman's voice was ethereal and could not be found. Those who heard it could not help but be intoxicated. It was like an ethereal fairy. Yin Nuashing pursed her lips and thought for a while. Then she said, What do you want to know? It was still an ethereal voice. It was even more ethereal and ethereal than the woman's. No one even asked where the voice came from. The woman seemed to be stunned. After a while, she said, Just tell us what you know. Little fox of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan. What will happen if we tell you something? On the 3rd floor, a young man said with a smile, waving a folding fan. For now, I can't tell you. If you say something, someone will invite you to the back to discuss it in detail. There might be a reward. That's all I can tell you. The woman in the fog said softly. Then she smiled. You don't have to worry. Do you think the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan would dare to do anything in public? Everyone laughed dryly. Indeed, there were many famous forces and clans present. The Dark Cloud Immortal Clan could not afford to offend them. Moreover, they rarely fought with anyone. Yin Nuashing glanced at Little White. How is it? Can you recognize anything? Little White's white eyebrows were almost knitted together. Hearing this, she rolled her eyes. I don't know. It's been too long. There are only some weak, very weak demon auras left. Other than that, there's nothing else. The young man with a folding fan who spoke just now walked to the front of the high platform. The Saint-grade glazed crystals hung 1 meter above the ground, floating and emitting light. He walked around the 6 glazed crystals and reached out to pat them. After a while, he slapped his folding fan on his hand. He said with a smile, "These instruments are quite old. After a long time, all traces have disappeared. Only a wisp of aura related to the demon experts remains. It's hard to guess." Yin Nuashing was using the Book of Epics to look back. Hearing this, she heaved a sigh of relief. If someone else said anything, then he would have no chance. Although that's the case, I can't see anything. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook her head. The young man with a folding fan cupped his hands at the high platform and returned to the third floor. He shook his head at his companions with a regretful expression. There were also others who came forward and walked around the 6 Saint-grade glazed crystals. Some even gathered together and stared at them with their eyes wide open. Some pressed their hands on the glazed crystals and closed their eyes to sense something. Many people had confusion in their eyes when they left. Obviously, they might have sensed something, but they couldn't tell at all. These ancient tools came from the previous era. Furthermore, they were obtained from some special places. Suddenly, a young man walked out with his hands behind his back. He looked at the high platform and smiled faintly. "I wonder if that's the case?" The woman in the fog nodded slightly and said, "Do you have any other special feelings? Or any other special insights?" Yin Nuashing stopped what she was doing and looked at the young man. She narrowed her eyes. It was the powerful guy from the group, just now. She had been talking for a long time, but he didn't say anything. She didn't expect him to jump out at this moment. Finally, the young man sighed and shook his head. He walked back a little unconvinced. It seemed that his answer didn't satisfy the people of the Cloud Immortal clan. "It's about time." Yin Nuashing stretched. He didn't get up and didn't go forward to look. He directly transmitted his voice. "You seem to be looking for something in the land of the ultimate plane region." The voice was ethereal and untraceable. It was impossible to tell whether it was a man or a woman. The woman in the fog trembled and replied in her mind, "You are. I'm here. Don't be surprised. I'll say something next. If I'm right, don't make it public. If I'm wrong, just pretend I didn't say anything." Yin Nuashing smiled faintly. His mouth opened and closed. His voice was so weak that no one could eavesdrop on it. After a while, the woman's emotions seemed to fluctuate. Yin Nuashing didn't urge her. He just drank his tea with a smile on his face. "What are you smiling about?" Little White looked at him. "What did you see?" Yin Nuashing put down his teacup and nodded. The things hidden in the 6 Saint-grade glazed crystals were made by the same person. However, they were hidden in different places. Now, they've been gathered together again. Little White's face twitched. The Book of Epics is really a cheat. There is someone who didn't rely on experience or other things to determine what an antique was. Instead, he relied on the Book of Epics to continuously trace back what had happened to those antiques. He traced back a past that had been buried by time. This ability was really heaven-defying. Moreover, it was something that happened 30 epochs ago. Since you know, why don't you go up and say it? Aren't you looking for the Dark Cloud Immortal Fox clan? Now's your chance. Little White pouted. "I've already said it. Just now." Yin Nuashing said. Little White smiled bitterly. So he was laughing about this just now? Lon Xin, and Mei Mao blinked. Looking at the dazzling Saint-grade glazed crystals, they asked curiously, "What are those artifacts?" Yin Nuashing stroked the teacup with her finger and muttered, "Broken weapons, a formation artifact that a certain person had used before, as well as a few ornaments. All of these items used to be that person's personal belongings, slowly being modified by his presence into items that aren't inferior to God's park weapons at all. Could it be that that person used to be an enlightened master?" Little White opened his eyes wide. Only people in that realm could have this kind of ability, right? Yin Nuashing nodded silently. According to some ancient records, after searching and tracing back in the Book of Epics, we finally determined that the owner of those artifacts was most likely an expert of the Demon Clan. Until today, the last enlightened master of the Demon Clan and the spiritual god who became an enlightened master in the 110th epoch. Many records stopped here. We only know that the heavenly god called himself Ling, but we don't know what kind of Ling he was. We don't know his divine position, and we don't know his race. That's strange. Why are the records from the previous era as ambiguous as the records from the High Antiquity era and the High Antiquity era. Oh, the latter has almost been cut off, but at least some records from the High Antiquity era still exist. There are still some records of the Ancient Age. Yin Nuoxing had a strange expression. He only knew that the enlightened master was called the spiritual god. There was no more information. We can still find the enlightened master's mark of the enlightened master in this world. However, I don't think we can find the enlightened master himself. If not for the 5 enlightened masters, he is either in a deeper level of hibernation, not in the realm of the gods, or dead. Can't we find him through the enlightened master's mark of the enlightened master in the realm of the gods? Little White asked. Yin Nuoxing sighed. It's just something like a title deed. It won't disappear unless it's destroyed. If I give you a title deed, can you find the owner of the title deed in the realm of the gods, or even in this world? Lan Xen smiled bitterly. This was really difficult. After a moment of silence, the woman in the fog on the high platform continued to talk to the others. She invited them to come forward and take a look. Yin Nuoxing and the other 2 were stunned. Could it be that there was a mistake? Was there a problem with the Book of Epics? Yin Nuoxing was dumbfounded. Just as he was about to take out the Book of Epics to take a closer look, a maid walked over from their table in a remote corner. She leaned close to him and whispered, "Young master, please follow me. The goddess of my clan invites you." Yin Nuoxing was even more stunned. A bunch of question marks appeared in his mind. However, he only raised his eyebrows. Didn't you say that your cognitive blur had reached its limit? Little White stood up with a blank expression. How could someone recognize you now? How would I know? How would I know? After all, it's just an imitation. That's not right. But when we entered, you saw that everyone was looking at Xen. Yin Nuoxing was confused. Lan Xen nodded vigorously. Indeed, only a small portion of them were looking at Yin Nuoxing curiously. They wanted to see through his true identity. In the end, how did she recognize me? Yin Nuoxing was very confused. He didn't tell the woman in the fog where he was. He only said that he was present, and then he was found. Could it be that the people of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan had some method to distinguish between the real and the fake? After leaving the White Pavilion, they walked along a small path in the sea of flowers. The Dark Cloud Immortal Pavilion was at the side of a wide garden. It was surrounded by a sea of flowers and green trees. When Yin Nuoxing and the others came in, they didn't look carefully. There was actually a very wide lake in this place. The lake water was green and clear. The flower petals on the shore swayed in the wind. When they landed on the water's surface, they created a layer of shallow ripples. The goddess of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan wasn't in the pavilion. Yin Nuoxing could tell that they were going to the back of the pavilion. He remembered that there was only one path on the high platform. It led to the lake behind the pavilion. At this moment, he went around the white pavilion. He saw that behind the pavilion, there was a wide pavilion suspended in the air. It was hanging above the lake. After crossing the lake, it landed on a small island in the center of the lake. At the lakeside, snow-white trees connected together. When the wind blew, it was like a snowstorm. It didn't bring the slightest chill. The pavilion was decorated, and there were clusters of beautiful flowers on the shore. This place was so quiet that there weren't any noisy discussions. If one pricked up their ears, they could even hear the clear sound of flowing water. "Where is your goddess?" Yin Nuoxing looked at the maidservant who was leading the way in front of him, a small island in the middle of the lake. "Don't worry, sir." The maidservant smiled faintly. Although she was a maidservant, she was also a demon of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan. She was also very beautiful. When she looked around, her bright eyes were naturally charming. "How do you know me? Tell me directly. How did you find me?" Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. He felt that something was suspicious, and he was slightly vigilant. The maidservant's face was still full of smiles. She nodded slightly and said softly, "It was the goddess who found your location." After saying that, the maidservant didn't say anything else. This made Yin Nuoxing very confused. He couldn't figure out how he had exposed himself. How could she have seen through so much? She led Yin Nuoxing and the others to the suspended pavilion. After walking for 200 feet, she came to the other end of the pavilion. The maidservant stopped and bowed slightly to the three of them. She said, "The goddess is in the pavilion in front of us. Sir, please go ahead." After he finished speaking, he returned from the pavilion the way he came from, causing Yin Nuoxing and the other two to have a puzzled look on their faces. What happened today was truly a bit mysterious. The three of them looked at each other. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and walked with a majestic gait. He wasn't as careful as when he was being led by others. Since we are already here, we should just take things as they come. I don't care anymore. I must see who the goddess is. She didn't even show her face. She could see through my true appearance from a few walls more than 100 meters away. I'm really curious. Behind him, Lon Xner and Whitey smiled bitterly. They broke into a trot and hurried to keep up. The island in the middle of the lake wasn't very big. After walking along the path for 100 steps, they arrived in front of the pavilion. There was only one person in the pavilion. Her clothes were as white as snow, and her fairy aura was floating in the air. The woman sat quietly in the pavilion. One of her jade-like hands was placed on the stone table, while the other hand was supporting her chin. She looked sideways at the three of them who were walking along the path. Her skin exposed to the air was like the snow in the deep winter. It was pure white and sickly pale, almost transparent. Her bright and beautiful face revealed a trace of cleverness and exquisiteness. Her pale lips were slightly curved, and her bright eyes were narrowed. She had an indescribable sense of beauty. What surprised people was that they couldn't see the charm in her eyes. They thought that those were the characteristics of a fox, but she looked like a little girl of the human race. Her pretty face was no more than 16 years old, and she looked like a young girl. Her body was tall and slender, with curves in all the right places. Her long snow-white hair, which was like clouds, went past her small waist and fell on her legs. Against the fragrant mist of flowers that filled the air of this small island in the middle of the lake, she was like a goddess of ice and snow. There were also 2 snow-white flowers with a hint of pink by her ears. If it were to snow here, perhaps only that little bit of pink would be able to be her distinguishing color. This young girl was snow-white from head to toe. Even her eyebrows were white. Her smiling eyes were slightly curved, and her pupils were also white. However, one could clearly see the difference between the whites of her eyes and the whites of her eyes. There was a silver-white mask on the pavilion. It was a cute little fox. However, Yin Nuoxing didn't know why she wasn't wearing it. Even the three of them didn't know. However, when he saw this young girl, he was slightly stunned. This wasn't because he was stunned by the girl. Logically speaking, the girls around him were all so beautiful that it would be difficult for him to be stunned by another young girl. The reason why he was stunned was purely because he felt something strange. It was as if he had just woken up from a dream and couldn't distinguish between reality and dreams. It was as if his dusty memories were about to be opened. Yin Nuoxing was still in doubt. The young girl, who was so white that she could blend in with the snowflakes, stood up gracefully. With a flash, she suddenly appeared in front of him. At this moment, he was still stunned and couldn't react. Then, in the next second, he felt himself being embraced by a soft and warm embrace. Yin Nuoxing was shocked. Xiao Bai and Lan Xan were also shocked. The way they looked at him changed in an instant. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched violently. I have something to say." Xiao Bai was amused. "Go and explain it to a ghost. How could you meet your little lover in this place?" Yin Nuoxing was sweating profusely. "No, listen to my explanation. I think I can explain it. However, I don't know where to start because I don't know how to explain it." Lan Xen sighed and shook her head. She wanted to pull Xiao Bai and retreat. Chapter 1041. The sudden scene shocked Yin Nuoxing. Lan Xen, and Little White were also in disbelief. They took a step back and looked suspiciously at the two people who were stuck together, especially when they saw the divine lady of the dark cloud celestial race sticking to the former's chest and rubbing her face against his neck like a kitten. This scene was extremely strange. Woo-woo. In the end, the little magic, who was being squashed by Yin Nuoxing and the divine lady of the dark cloud celestial race, let out a dissatisfied cry. Only then did the two people come back to their senses. Yin Nuoxing shook his head violently and gently pushed the snow-like girl away. He put his palms together and said calmly, "Benefactor, could it be that you have mistaken me for someone else?" Uff. The snow-like girl covered her mouth and giggled. However, she didn't say anything. She pulled out the chubby ball that was waving its little feet in dissatisfaction and placed it on his head. Then, she jumped into his arms with a smile. Yin Nuashing and Lan Xian were confused and confused. This familiar action and the familiar ball on his head couldn't be a coincidence. It seemed that only they knew this posture. Who exactly was this girl? Moreover, this posture of rubbing against him didn't seem like a coquettish act in front of a loved one. It was more like a pet rubbing against its master's body. At this moment, Little White blinked and slowly widened his eyes. He seemed to have understood something. He looked at the two people and suddenly exclaimed, "You are Xiao Xian." He. The snow-like girl nodded with a smile. Her snow-white arms hugged Yin Nuashing's neck. She tiptoed slightly and pressed her whole body against him. Yin Nuashing was just about to push the girl away when he heard this. He was stunned and his hand was suspended in midair. "Huh? What did you say?" Even the ball-shaped little magic on his head widened his eyes. He looked confused and sniffled. Then he was even more shocked. He couldn't understand why this girl had the same aura as the lazy fox. The point was, both of them actually occupied this position. Little Magic was annoyed, but when he thought about how he couldn't beat this guy, he lay down dejectedly, his tail swinging weakly behind him. Yin Nuashing was already a little dazed and confused. When he heard this, he became even more confused. Throughout his many years of life, he had never experienced such a strange thing. He was confused because the divine flame in his body trembled slightly. When he heard Little White's words, he became even more confused. "That little fox is you? Then what's the matter with Xiao Xian?" Yin Nuashing finally couldn't help but ask. At the same time, she tried to gently push the girl away, but she realized that she couldn't push her away with just a little bit of strength. The snow-white girl finally had enough of being in his arms. Before Lan Shiner could not bear to watch any longer, she gently moved away. Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuashing's confused face and covered her mouth as she giggled. Is there something that even the deity does not know? Her voice was sweet, distant, and ethereal. It was like the sound of nature with a faint hint of coldness. Yin Nuashing's face darkened. At this moment, he already knew that she was Xiao Xian. He subconsciously raised his hand and gently knocked her head. "Don't give me that. Although I know everything in the world, there are still many things that I don't know." The girl covered her head and stuck out her tongue. Then, she reached out her hand to Yin Nuashing and shook it gently beside his neck. Xiao Xian, who was curled up inside, revealed her head and rubbed it against his neck. She jumped onto his hand and walked along his arm to his shoulder. She cried out happily at him, the six tails behind her wagging happily. "She is the incarnation of my demon body. She is one with me. Previously, she was by my side. Unexpectedly, something happened, and her demon body was lost outside. However, we are in the same state. Even if we are far away from each other and can't sense each other, we are one. If one of us is injured, the other will also be injured suddenly," the snow-white girl, or rather, Xiao Xian said softly. Lan Shiner was suspicious. She tilted her head and asked, "Brother Nuashing found Xiao Xian in the Ganyuan region, and he was covered in injuries. Were you at that time?" "At that time, I was—" Xiao Xian hesitated for a moment and looked at Yin Nuashing. Just as she was about to speak, the latter interrupted her. "In the everlasting night forest, you were subduing the flame of everlasting night, right?" Yin Nuashing's colorful eyes looked strange as he stared at Xiao Xian. "Do you still remember?" Xiao Xian was stunned for a moment. Then, she smiled happily and threw herself into his arms. Yin Nuashing sighed softly. Forget. It was not impossible. After all, he was the one who got there first. At that time, his state of mind was still quite weak. When he encountered such a situation, he would have a slight breakdown. Fortunately, if he had recovered his memory and most of his personality at this time and encountered such a situation, he would probably not do much. With his current state, he probably wouldn't even be interested in the flame of everlasting night. He would probably have to consider the value of subduing the flame of everlasting night. Of course, it was also possible that he would eat it and leave without saying anything. Anyway, he remembered that person. That girl was as white as snow in the pitch-black flame, curled up in a small ball. I have a lot of things to say to you. Xiao Xian buried her face in Yun Nuoxing's chest. Many emotions surged in her heart. When she subdued the flame of everlasting night in the everlasting night forest, she almost turned into ashes. Her consciousness kept wandering between blurred and dead. When she saw the two people barging in, her heart was dead. She thought that this was the end of her life, but she didn't expect that the young man would save her life. She was dazed, sad, and disappointed. She thought that the powerful attack was about to land, but instead, it resolved the crisis for her and suddenly disappeared. However, she remembered the disappointed look on the young man's face. A few years later, when she tried to subdue the flame of everlasting night by force and wanted to improve, her original body was severely injured. Even with the help of the 9 heavens spirit-subduing array, it was still too difficult for a demon to subdue a divine flame. Demons couldn't control the elements. Only some special races could control the power of the elements. Moreover, they could only borrow the power of the elements, and they couldn't absorb it into their bodies. Obviously, the Dark Cloud Immortal race was not in this category. The Dark Cloud Immortal race was obviously a Dark Cloud Immortal race. Her original body, which was injured, projected the same injury on her body. Originally, she wanted to run out to prevent the humans who were staying temporarily from seeing her abnormal condition. With the help of her race's talent and the flame of everlasting night, she broke into Yishi's place. However, she accidentally met the young man again. Once again, she was saved by him. At that time, she really wanted to say something to him, but for some reason, she didn't say it. If she said it, the two girls beside him would definitely understand. Until now, she didn't know why she didn't say anything at that time. Therefore, she stayed in his body until today, when they officially met again. She couldn't help but sigh at the wonders of fate. Yun Nuoxing felt that her emotions were in turmoil. For a moment, she was speechless and didn't know what to say. He sighed softly and hesitated for a few seconds. Then, he reached out his hand and stroked her snow-white hair. He said gently, "If you can't say it, then don't force yourself to say it. I can probably guess what you want to say." He sighed deeply. "It has been more than 10 years. I didn't expect that the little fox was actually you. This world is really, the word fate is really something that can never be fully understood." Now, he knew how he was found just now. If Xiao Xian wanted to find his location, it couldn't be any easier. When Xiao Xian gradually calmed down, the four of them sat down at the pavilion. Her Dark Cloud Immortal race ran 2 rounds on the table and jumped onto Yun Nuoxing's neck. She was used to wrapping herself around him. "Xiao Xian, you are from the Demon Clan, right?" Lan Shiner moved closer to Xiao Xian and pulled a lock of her snow-white hair. "The Demon Clan can't touch the power of the elements, especially fire. Why did you go and subdue the flame of eternal night?" "Xiao Xian, since you are from the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan, it will be much more convenient. You know why we are here, right?" Xiao Xian nodded slightly. "In fact, Xing, the place you are looking for might be the same place that our clan is going to." Yun Nuoxing carelessly ruffled the girl's hair, then carefully tidied it up. "Just be more natural." Xiao Xian blinked and suddenly laughed again. She jumped into his arms and rubbed against him, causing him to laugh bitterly. After a while, Xiao Xian raised her head and said, "The demon incarnation is one with me. Little Star, I know everything about you. So, when you were looking for Little Star, I was already investigating. In the end, I accidentally discovered that the place you're going to might be the same place that we are going to." "Where is it roughly?" Yun Nuoxing asked. "In the far west of the ultimate plain region, at the edge of the God-falling sky," Xiao Xian said. "In the end, we still have to go there." Yun Nuoxing slapped his forehead and felt a headache coming on. Xiao Xian smiled helplessly. The demon incarnation hanging around Yin Nuoxing's neck also wagged its tail. She muttered in a low voice, "After you came to the realm of the gods, my connection with the demon incarnation was restored. I can directly find where you are. At that time, we were also in the south, but we happened to be going to the Thousand Bee City, so we directly teleported there. We wanted to wait for you to come to the Thousand Bee City, but we left first. Then, we didn't plan to stop at the Demon King's city." Hearing this, Xiaobai understood. "You followed our footsteps all the way here, found out Little Star's whereabouts, and preemptively stopped here to wait for him to come?" Xiao Xian's pretty face turned slightly red, and she nodded shyly. Xiaobai couldn't help but laugh. "I can't help but want to meet him." Xiao Xian nodded again, her snow-white face turning even redder. After a while, they recovered from the reminiscing atmosphere and remembered the purpose of coming here. Xiao Xian pulled Yin Nuoxing's hands, her bright eyes filled with seriousness as she asked seriously, "Little Star, you said you know the origin of the item sealed in the glazed crystal. Can you tell us in detail?" "Oh, that's all I know. The Book of Epic's backtracking ability has reached its limit, and it's being blocked by something," Yin Nuoxing said, shrugging. She thought for a while, and then explained the information she obtained from the Book of Epics in detail. "The only valuable thing is that I know it's a heavenly god who called herself Spirit. She became a heavenly god around the 110th era." Yin Nuoxing looked up diagonally, then turned to look at Xiao Xian. "What's wrong? Is that spirit god related to you? Is it the last heavenly god of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan?" Hearing this, Xiao Xian smiled bitterly and shook her head. "The Dark Cloud Immortal Clan has never produced a heavenly god. The strongest clan member, an ancestor, might have died when he was close to becoming a heavenly god. The Dark Cloud Immortal Clan has survived from ancient times. Although there are no heavenly gods in the clan, there are still experts at the level of god. They managed to preserve some of the seeds of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan, and they didn't go extinct. In the past, we didn't know what happened to that ancestor at the level of god. Now, from the information I got from you, Little Star, he might have died in the Great Reincarnation." Lon Xin sighed. "The turbulence of eras and the Great Reincarnation. Even heavenly gods can only barely survive. It's normal that they can't resist it. Brother Nuoxing, is it really impossible to resist the Great Reincarnation?" Yin Nuoxing looked down and shook her head. "It can't be helped. This is the inevitable trend of the Great Yuan realm's own activities. If it doesn't reset this world will only become more and more dilapidated. In the end, there will be nothing left. Even the Great Yuan realm will wither. If heavenly gods hide in the realm of the gods and deal with it with all their strength, they might be able to survive. Heavenly gods can leave the realm of the gods and resist the Great Reincarnation alone, but it's also risky. If they hide in the realm of the gods and put up a defense, it's not impossible to avoid the Great Reincarnation. This is the safest way. After all, the several layers of defense in the realm of the gods are used for defense. Theoretically, they can resist the Great Reincarnation, but they can't prevent the Great Reincarnation from taking away many lives in the realm of the gods." Yin Nuoxing rubbed her fingers and said softly, Let's not talk about this. Anyway, we will be able to experience it for ourselves after a period of time. Before that, we just need to be prepared." Yin Nuoxing shook her head and sighed. Lon Xian, and the other two were speechless. After a period of time, the 139th era had just begun. One era was 1 trillion years. Was this considered a period of time? The heavenly god's concept of time was indeed broken? Lon Xian laughed bitterly. She decided not to probe further into this issue with him. Although she had survived from the mythological era, she had not lived for a long time. When she woke up, she only closed her eyes and opened them, and an era had already passed. She even felt that the mythological era had not passed for long, but in this world, 100 eras had already passed. That spiritual god was the last heavenly god to be born in the demon clan. Xiao Xian pulled the topic back to the original track and said softly, "There were 3 heavenly gods born in this era, but none of them were related to the demon clan. Moreover, they all disappeared very quickly. Going back to the distant past, that spiritual god was the last heavenly god to be born in the demon clan. However, there are not many records about her. I learned from the Book of Epochs and the Pillar of Creation that since the beginning of the previous era, the rules of the world had weakened to a certain extent. This process lasted for a very long time, probably starting from the mythological era. After the end of the gods' era, the rules of the world had gradually weakened. It was very obvious in the last two eras. During this period, the rules of the gods' realm seemed to have weakened to a greater extent than the other places in the Eight Elements realm. After the middle of the previous era, the rules of the world had weakened to a certain extent. Therefore, that spiritual god might have sensed something in advance. She either left the god's realm or went into hibernation in advance. I'm not sure. Yin Nuashing frowned. The rules of heaven and earth in this world must have encountered some problems. They had weakened to such an extent that they were not even 1% of the rules of the primordial era. The situation in the god's realm was even worse. That was why those later divine level experts had either run away or gone into hiding. Xiao Xian nodded and said, "But there is a very ancient record. The last heavenly god of the demon clan had left something behind. It was something that could allow a small clan to prosper for eternity. Then, your Dark Cloud Immortal clan has been searching for that place? In the end, you speculated that it might be in that godfall sky." Yin Nuashing wanted to stroke her hair, but her hands were still tightly held. He could feel that the pair of small hands holding his were slightly sweaty. Xiao Xian nodded. "Then, you all probably knew about this place. Perhaps it was because you had sensed the aura of the demon clan's king in there, so no demon dared to enter. But in fact, you're not too sure whether the aura of the demon clan's king has anything to do with little Qing and the others." Yin Nuashing continued. Xiao Xian also nodded, her pearly white teeth gently biting her red lips. "So, you plan to let me go there? No matter whether the aura inside has anything to do with the four celestial gods, there should be something inside. Because I am the most trustworthy person who is most likely to enter? If it had been someone else, she would have just brushed them off. But she couldn't possibly have any reservations about him." Xiao Xian laughed bitterly and nodded heavily. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself for a while. When he saw that Xiao Xian's expression was slightly gloomy and dejected, he couldn't help but laugh faintly. "Then let's go. We were going to go there anyway. What if it really is inside, right?" Huh. Xiao Xian was stunned. She raised her head in astonishment. The little fox also stood up. The six tails behind her spun vigorously like pinwheels. "Can I go? I thought Little Star would find it troublesome. I was going to go there anyway." Yin Nuashing shrugged. He freed his hands and pinched the girl's cheeks. "What nonsense are you thinking? Didn't you say that you knew about us? Then you should have known long ago. We will also find the godfall sky. Since our destination is the same, and it's your business, then there's no other way." Yin Nuashing stood up. He placed his hands on his hips and laughed loudly. "As a qualified poop picker, I need to solve my master's problems." Xiao Bai and Lan Exen almost rolled off the pavilion. Xiao Xian was also speechless. However, she knew that this was his personality. There was nothing much to say. After all, it was normal for him to be off the rails. When she thought of this, she couldn't help but pounce forward. The three of them cried out in surprise. The pavilion was lively again. Chapter 1042. In the pavilion, they would quarrel for a while and then talk about something seriously. It was as if they were having a stroke. If outsiders saw this, their jaws would probably drop. However, this was how Yin Nuashing and his family normally got along. They would be serious, but more often than not, they would be heartless. Sooner or later, the people around him would also become heartless. "Xiao Xian, it seems that your Dark Cloud Immortal clan has brought quite a number of middle and high-level gods with them." Yin Nuashing glanced at the other parts of the courtyard. In some small buildings nearby, powerful auras were vaguely emitted. They were all experts of the Dark Cloud Immortal clan. Xiao Xian laughed bitterly. "Originally, there weren't that many elites who came with me. It was just me and a few of my maidservants. Not long ago, The strange phenomenon that spread throughout the realm of the gods alerted the elites of our clan. It wasn't a big deal at first, but the secluded factions of the gods sent out a group of young elites to roam the land. They were worried about me traveling alone, so they sent a group of people to protect me. Although I feel that with Little Star around, no one can threaten me. In the end, he even muttered a sentence, which made Yin Nuashing laugh bitterly. It turned out that this was another person who treated him as a protective talisman. Judging from the words of the dozens of people who knew him, the area within 30 meters of him was an absolutely safe area and would obtain an incomparably reassuring effect. So, where does this sense of security come from? Yin Nuashing scratched his head. This guy has no self-awareness. In the spiritual world, Zi heard this voice and couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. He didn't pay attention to this guy whose mind was full of other strange things, and went to Ti Shi Lai and Shi Yin. Anyway, this guy had no self-awareness for a long time. So, you're running around the land of Ultimate Plane just to collect those things? Wan Xiner asked. Xiao Xian shook her head. Those things were excavated from a place a long time ago. There was a seer in our clan who traveled a long distance in that domain. He speculated that there were dozens of places that might be related to those 6 ancient artifacts. We searched for them in the Ultimate Plane region and eliminated those places one by one. At first, we had another plan. If anyone knew these things and could give us some useful information, we could bring them with us to that place. She looked at Yin Nuashing, and the 3 of them suddenly understood. Later on, he came. He alone could take on a group of people, so there was no need to bring those people along. Yesterday, we estimated that you would have reached here by now, so we planned to let the experts of our clan go back first. However, we didn't tell them that the Godfall Sky is a rather famous forbidden area. They felt that it would be safer to go with us, so they stayed behind. Xiao Xian covered her face with her hands and sighed. She knew that Yin Nuashing didn't like too many people and didn't like trouble. Yin Nuashing thought about it and shrugged. It doesn't matter. Xiao Xian, I believe that you can handle it well. Let's not talk about this for now. What do you plan to leave? We can leave tomorrow. We don't have any other plans. The most important thing for us to stay in Demon King City is to wait for Little Star and you. The second thing is to rest and look for people who know. Xiao Xian shook her head and said, It's almost evening today. Let's rest for the night. It won't take much effort to reach the Godfall Sky from here. We can reach it in the morning. Yin Nuashing nodded. You can arrange it. Xiao Xian nodded. She got up and led them to a pavilion that only had 2 floors. This was where she would rest. Yin Nuashing and the others didn't have any special requests. They just said that they might go out for a stroll. When Xiao Xian heard this, she seemed to have thought of something. She quickly took out a snow-white token from her bracelet and stuffed it into Yin Nuashing's hand. This is the token of my clan. Yes, Little Star, with this you can come and go as you wish in the Dark Cloud Immortal Tower. It also has some other special uses, although you might not need them. After Xiao Xian finished speaking, she walked out of the pavilion. It seemed that she had something to do. Yin Nuashing slumped on the sofa lazily. Lan Xener also sat down and leaned against him. She looked at the door. Xiao Xian's figure had already disappeared. Lan Xener gently stroked Yin Nuashing's long hair and teased, Brother Nuashing, how do you feel when you suddenly found out that the little fox you once picked up is actually the divine lady of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan and is as beautiful as a fairy? Yin Nuashing waved her hand to show that she didn't feel anything. However, she was stunned for a moment and raised her head. If I have to say, it's fate. It's wonderful. Lan Xener covered her mouth and chuckled. Probably no one would have thought that the little fox was actually the divine lady of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan. She didn't even recognize the 2 4 divine beasts. We're the deities. The inheritance of the demon clan is so amazing. Xiao Xian's lifespan is less than 300 years, right? Probably. Among the people we know, no one is more than 300 years old. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment. She lay face down on the sofa and said lazily, probably 3 times older than Qian Qian. For deities, those who are less than 100,000 years old are considered young. Those who are less than 60,000 years old are considered geniuses among the elites. Those who are less than 10,000 years old are considered special circumstances. For example, Xiao Xian. Yin Nuoxing yawned and turned over. The power that comes from the inheritance is not cultivated by oneself. It requires a period of time to master it accurately. Moreover, this kind of superinheritance is risky and has many conditions. Xiao Xian has the bloodline of the deities of her clan. That's why she was able to receive that kind of inheritance. Before she can completely master that kind of power, she won't be able to make any progress in her realm. However, because of the seal, if she doesn't use special methods to break it, she'll have to wait for a long time. She can use this time to familiarize herself with her power as much as possible and continue to cultivate. Xian, you are very scary yourself. Not counting the age of your soul, your actual age is less than 40 years old. Yin Nuoxing raised his head and looked at the little girl. He laughed and said, a 30-year-old hellish king elite. What do you think? It's not a special circumstance. Other people reach this level when they are 1,000,000 years old or 10 million years old. Lan Xen rolled her eyes and lowered her head. She touched his forehead with her forehead and said, I don't have any thoughts. It's just hellish king. For Brother Nuoxing, it's nothing. You little girl, I'm only a demigod now. Yin Nuoxing did not know whether to laugh or cry. Don't always use me as an example. The glory of the past is always in the past. After talking for a while, it became quiet again. Little White was curled up on the sofa and sleeping. As he was worried that other people would look at him, he did not transform into his original form. Lan Xian lifted Yin Nuoxing's head and placed him on her soft thighs. She stroked his bangs and looked at his beautiful and charming eyes. She was slightly lost in thought. As soon as Yin Nuoxing's mind calmed down, he didn't know where he had drifted to. His mind was filled with all sorts of messy thoughts. The previous incident with Navila made him feel somewhat uncomfortable. At this moment, he wanted to contact that idiot, but he seemed to be in a deep sleep. In this era where the rules were suppressed, he probably wasn't feeling too well. He was even injured. Judging from the voice he heard last time, his injury might not be light. The void fog, he whispered in his soul. Yin Nuoxing frowned and sighed in his heart. It was another thing that he had never seen in the ancient era. He was a little concerned about it, but he could not care about it now. Maybe he could find out about it when the world orb crashed into him. At least, he could not do so now. His drifting thoughts turned to himself. He thought of the broken sun god Bao and could not help but wrinkle his nose. The sun god Bao had been repaired by Su Ming and Ling Hong. The seventh red star, sword, still retained some consciousness. Su Ming checked it and found that it was seriously damaged. It was almost the same as her. It had been repaired for dozens of eras, but it was still not fully repaired. It needed to be nurtured in the receptive spirit, godly body for some time. Of course, this some time was quite a long time. Su Ming had been in his body for more than 20 years, and he had not yet repaired it. Moreover, he recently found that the dozens of eternal divine weapons in his body seemed a little strange. They were flickering and moving, but he did not find any dangerous situation. There were 3 eternal divine weapons in his body and 1 divine power weapon. Just in case, he had also stuffed a few God's Park weapons into his body. It turned out that the receptive spirit, godly body could store God's Park weapons at will. However, it could also be because he had forged those God's Park weapons himself and left his divine soul imprint on them, so they did not reject him. The same could not be said for the other God's Park weapons. There was also the problem of the Great Guardian Formation. After solving it, he had to go to the small divine land. That was the collection point of the Great Guardian Formation. Even if he activated all 5 Great Guardian Formations and cleaned the surface of the God world, it would not affect the small divine land. This was the function of the collection point. In the ancient era, the small divine land was used to protect those who had nothing to do with it. How come Xian and the others have been cultivating for so long? Yin Nuoxing's consciousness went into the soul world and circled around. He came to the mansion and found the temporary secret room where Zi Yin and the others were hidden. He took a look at them one by one, which made him frown. Chu Chun, who had the smallest capacity, had been cultivating for a long time. Originally, it was scheduled to take more than 10 days, and it should be finished in less than 20 days at the latest. However, it had been a month, and he still hadn't woken up, which made him puzzled. Maybe it's a matter of time? Z stood next to him and leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. He said calmly, "I still remember a little about celestial fate. At least it still existed in the later stages of the ancient era." I don't know about the past few eras, but according to some of the ancient books we found and collected, celestial fate should not have existed in the past 2 eras. In other words, celestial fate might not have existed in the ancient era. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment. Are you trying to say that because no one has used celestial fate for a long time, or at least the current generation has not had much contact with it, such pure celestial fate would need a long time to be used to it? To put it bluntly, it's just picking up something that was once used but abandoned. It would take a long time to pick it up. Z spread his hands. Anyway, that was what he meant. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment and twirled a strand of hair with his fingers. It's not impossible. If that's the case, the Book of Epics. He shouted and took out the Book of Epics. He pointed it at Chu Chun, who was sitting cross-legged on the stone bed. He looked inside and made a simple deduction. Then, his expression became a little strange. It'll take about a month. It's expected. Z shrugged and waved his hand. Don't worry. I'll take care of them for you. If there's nothing else, I'll go back and take care of the children. Yin Nuashing. Children? Shilu and Shiyin? When he thought of this, he felt a headache coming on. He couldn't help but sigh. He'd better think of other things, such as the astral origin technique. He had almost finished studying the astral origin technique. Oh, he had also placed the star creation chart in that palace, borrowing the astral origin evolution of the star palace to deduce the chart. The palace he had entered at that time seemed to be a bedroom, and there was a person lying on the bed. It was the old ghost, and there was also a servant energy creature that the old ghost had created, which had intelligence. At that time, when he went to borrow the astral origin evolution, that energy creature readily agreed. It was probably the old ghost's arrangement. He didn't know how it was after more than 10 days as he thought about it. He activated the astral origin art. His soul entered the space and directly arrived at the place where the astral origin art was hidden. It was a massive room that was 1,000 feet long and wide. Every inch of the floor was covered in dense golden runes and all sorts of runes. At first glance, it looked like the floor was made of golden tiles. Buzz! Someone suddenly appeared here. A glowing energy creature also appeared on the wall. Although it was humanoid, it was only humanoid. It didn't even have facial features. When it saw that the person who had suddenly appeared was Yin Nuashing, it bowed and prepared to hide back into the wall. Hey, wait. Yin Nuashing hurriedly called out to the energy creature. How's that old, your master? He's still in a deep sleep. Master's sleep is getting longer and longer. We're very worried. The energy creature gently buzzed, and a series of words directly sounded in Yin Nuashing's mind. Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment. Then, he waved his hand and took out something from the pendant. Although it was only a soul body, it could be directly taken out from a soul body if it was a spatial container that was connected to the soul body. However, there weren't many spatial containers that had this function. Of course, there weren't many souls that could allow the soul to travel such a long distance. He had only used the astral origin technique to teleport here. He took out a light purple flower that was the size of a wash basin. Put this beside that old cough, your master. See if there's any effect. After thinking for a moment, he added, if there's any effect, just take it as a gift from him for throwing this place to me. If there's no effect, then just pretend that nothing happened. The energy creature glanced at him and nodded. Then, it disappeared with the flower in a flash. Yin Nuashing sighed. In fact, that energy creature had the combat strength of a post-god level expert. After all, it was a life created by an expert above the heavenly god level. How could it be simple? It was just a lump. There probably wasn't such a thing. In the room where the astral origin technique had evolved, all the runes flickered with an extremely strong light. There was a star field that had expanded to a range of 10 feet. Those golden runes were connected to that star field. That star field was a place that he was very familiar with. After all, he had once holed up in that star field for 1,000 years. It was so dry that even people would grow moldy. It seems that there's no progress. Yin Nuashing scratched his head. The last time he came here, the runes in this room were not all lit up. It seemed that even if it was a high-level deduction made by an expert above the heavenly god level, it would still be very difficult to unravel the secrets contained in the astral origin technique. After staying in this room for a while, Yin Nuashing yawned. Unconsciously, he was lost in thought as he looked at the star field. Before he made the next 1,000-year days, it was better to retreat quickly, lest Lon Exiner and the others think that he was a living dead with an out-of-body experience. His soul only went out for a while. When he came back, Yin Nuashing had just opened his eyes. He saw Lon Xiner's big black eyes that were flickering with spiritual light. She was very close to him, or rather, she was glued to him. Seeing this, he was stunned. He wanted to say something, but his mouth seemed to have touched something. This made him roll his eyes. How many times has it been? What's wrong? After a long while, Yin Nuashing finally opened his mouth and asked. His finger gently tapped the girl's head. Nothing. When I saw that you were motionless, Brother Nuashing, I wanted to confirm whether you were asleep or dead. Lon Exen sat up straight and said lightly, as if nothing had happened. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and was about to say something. Suddenly, Lon Exen pulled him stand up and rushed out of the pavilion with a smile. A small whirlwind was created and caused a big commotion. And asterisk. At percent and asterisk. Little White jumped up in fright from the clanking sound. He looked around in a daze and started to mumble nonsense. In the end, he realized that everyone was gone. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Damn, where did you two go? Elope? Wait for me." Yin Nuashing was speechless. This white-haired guy, if he really wanted to elope, why would he wait for you? Moreover, he was dragged out. Lon Xin pulled Yin Nuashing and ran around the Demon King city. To put it bluntly, she was playing. She wandered aimlessly in the pavilion and felt bored after sitting for a while. They played happily in the Demon King city for a while. In fact, they were shopping and eating from one end of the street to the other. This afternoon gave them a feeling of peace and comfort. Yin Nuashing also felt inexplicably at ease, as if it should have been like this a long time ago. He was slightly absent-minded and his soul was touched. It seemed that he had been like this in the past. However, he didn't remember living such a peaceful life. He guessed that it was the other memories of the 70 eras of reincarnation. The memories that were imprinted in his soul were things he didn't know about. Perhaps that period of time was rather peaceful and comfortable. However, who knew? He didn't have that part as memories. He guessed that he wouldn't be able to find them. Since Zero had said that he had once hidden in the mortal world of the Three Elements realm, he probably lived a peaceful life there. After a long while, Lon Exen was carried back to the Tantric Immortal Tower by Yin Nuashing with an unsatisfied look on her face. There were also lively places in the Demon King city at night. It seemed to be in the south of the city. However, they were in the north, so they didn't know what was happening there. Anyway, it was quiet here. The streets were still lit up, and there were unique decorations of the Demon Clan everywhere. When he returned to Shao Xian's place in the Cloud Immortal building, a white figure pounced on him as soon as he entered the door, giving Yin Nuashing a fright. However, that white figure seemed to have noticed the person on his back. Only then did it stop in front of him and heave a sigh of relief. "Little star, you are back. Come take a look at this." The white figure was naturally Shao Xian. She hurriedly pulled Yin Nuashing to the front of the table. Lon Exen also jumped down from his back obediently. There was a triangular device on the table. It had an aura of decay. The aura of time was very strong, and it was very ancient. Upon closer inspection, it was a pyramid. A piece of the grayish-brown surface was peeled off, revealing a layer of brilliant gold underneath. It was emitting a faint glow. Isn't this the ancient device that was sealed in the holy glazed crystal? Yin Nuashing frowned. That's right. It was just peeled off because it sensed a strange movement. The one who replied was not Xiao Xian's voice. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He turned his head and realized that there was a second person in the room whom he had not noticed just now. We discovered that the device seems to be showing signs of coming back to life. Chapter 1043. Faint golden light filled the small pavilion. The pyramid on the table was wrapped in a layer of something grayish-brown, but couldn't stop the golden bottom layer from releasing light like the stars in the night sky. The light it released wasn't dazzling, but it was eye-catching. This pyramid was an ancient artifact sealed in the smallest piece of holy grade glazed crystal. At first glance, Yin Nuoxing could see a lot of things through the Book of Epics, but he didn't see any energy reaction for the glazed crystal. Unlike now, he didn't need the Book of Epics to look at it, but he could feel a familiar and deeply hidden energy spreading out. That energy was enough to command the world. That was the power of godly right. You said it came back to life? What do you mean by that? Yin Nuoxing frowned. It suddenly came back to life and released light and energy. It broke the shell of the holy grade glazed crystal and fell out by itself. The elder of the dark cloud immortal race shook his head and said, she looked very young, at least on the surface, and her aura was very powerful. She had the aura of an emperor god. I've never encountered such a situation before. We were very careful when moving the glazed crystal. We used an energy layer to isolate it, Xiao Xian said quickly when she saw Yin Nuoxing looking over. Yin Nuoxing frowned. After staring at it for a while, he said, can I take a look? Xiao Xian nodded quickly. The elder of the dark cloud immortal race saw this, and his face twitched imperceptibly. After thinking for a while, he took a deep look at Xiao Xian and nodded. Please. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. Some light surged in his right hand. He secretly made a dozen layers of defensive measures. Then he gently reached out and grabbed the pyramid. With that grab, he knew that all the defensive measures were in vain. This thing surged with pure godly right power, but didn't have the intimidating power of a weapon. Either this thing wasn't a weapon at all, or it wasn't a weapon anymore. Its core and everything else had been destroyed, and it had returned to its original form. If it was really a godly right weapon, even if the god or god was dead, it wouldn't be so calm when touched by others. It would more or less release a huge amount of energy to tell others that although its owner was dead, it wasn't. That was why he cautiously made a defensive posture. He was afraid that the power of the god and godly right would explode in an instant and blow up the pavilion and half of the city. However, the pyramid didn't move. It's not a godly right weapon. Yin Nuoxing muttered in his heart. He changed his sitting position and pinched the grayish-brown skin with his fingers. He gently pulled, and a piece of it peeled off, revealing more of the gold at the bottom. It looked like a pearl covered in mud. The elder of the dark cloud immortal race wanted to stop him, but when he saw that his divine lady was staring straight at Yin Nuoxing and the thing in his hand with great interest, his face twitched again. He stammered and didn't say anything. He couldn't help but sigh and look at Yin Nuoxing strangely. This girl's appearance couldn't escape her eyes. She had seen everyone as soon as she came in. She didn't know when her divine lady had gotten involved with this guy. Naturally, she could tell that there was something wrong with the way her divine lady looked at him. I've opened it. This grayish-brown skin is just a layer of ordinary stuff. Yin Nuoxing's voice was slightly serious. When the others heard this, their expressions also became slightly serious. They all took a deep breath and couldn't help but imagine what would happen in the next second. Patter. The grayish-brown skin was completely shaken off by Yin Nuoxing's strength, and pieces of it fell onto the table. The pyramid appeared in front of their eyes, intact. Nothing had happened, but the golden light became even more intense. It was like a small sun, and the light that shone out from the pavilion could illuminate an area of 10,000 miles. The intense light only flashed for a moment before it was suppressed by Yin Nuoxing's weak energy. The light disappeared, and what appeared in his hand was a neat pyramid. That's it. Little White moved his hand away from his eyes in a daze. What other special reaction did you expect? Yin Nuoxing glanced at him and said helplessly, Did you think that there would be some strange phenomenon like a landslide, a tsunami, or an earthquake? Little White thought for a moment and nodded seriously. He instinctively felt that this thing should be extraordinary. In the end, there was no reaction. Yin Nuashing sighed speechlessly. He looked at it carefully, and then used the Book of Epics to take a look. He was stunned, and his face twitched slightly. In the end, he casually threw it on the table with an indifferent look. How is it? Is there something wrong with this thing? Xiao Xian was also slightly stunned when she saw his indifferent look. She didn't quite understand what he meant. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head. This is nothing special. It's just a small toy. It's just that the owner has been carrying it around for a long time, and it's been tainted with a part of its aura. The owner of this item was once a god, and this toy has been tainted with a very, very weak aura of the god and the power of the divine right. Perhaps there was more at the beginning, but it has all disappeared with time. It's tainted with the aura of the god. That means this can be a divine artifact? Lonax Iner asked. Yin Nuashing shook his head. It's not the same. If it's tainted with the aura of the god for a long time, it can indeed turn into something that doesn't belong to... If you really want to put it this way, it's a divine artifact. It's an instrument tainted with the aura of the god, and it doesn't belong to the mortal world. That's right. You can understand it this way. Other than that, it doesn't have any other meaning. It's very different from a weapon, and they are not of the same nature. No matter how much it's tainted with the aura of the god, it can't become a divine artifact that can be used to attack. That's not right. It's very hard. If you throw it out, it might be able to kill a high-level god. The last sentence made the people in the pavilion speechless. Seeing this, Yin Nuashing said seriously, I'm serious. I'm not joking. This thing is tainted with the aura of the god, and it can deal with the defense of a high-level god as easily as cutting cabbage with a divine sword. If this thing is thrown out, no one within a radius of 10,000 feet will be able to survive. Everyone, in the end, Yin Nuashing thought of something and asked Xiao Xian to take out the things sealed in the holy grade mysterious crystals. The elder of the Dark Cloud Immortal tribe wanted to refuse, but Xiao Xian had already rushed out like a white whirlwind, leaving her in a mess. The elder had already inquired about some information related to Yin Nuashing from Xiao Xian, and she was the one who had gone to inquire about it. After all, she suddenly saw her goddess being very close to a young man who looked like a girl, and she didn't know why, so she was more or less on guard. In addition to some information about Yin Nuashing, she also saw some clues herself. That was, the way her goddess looked at him wasn't quite right. They didn't look like lovers or friends. Anyway, she felt strange from the bottom of her heart, especially when she saw the two of them sticking so close to each other, and her goddess was so obedient to him. Not long after, Xiao Xian rushed back with a whirlwind and stuffed a space ring into Yin Nuashing's hand. Here, it's all here. Then, she opened Mei Mao's eyes wide, and they sparkled brightly. Yin Nuashing smiled and pinched the girl's cheeks, making the elder feel very sick of it. It didn't take much effort to cut open the holy grade, mysterious crystals and take out the things hidden inside. There was a pagoda, a broken sword, half a pot, and two things with bumpy surfaces and broken shapes that couldn't be seen at all. It was really hard to tell what they were. Some people would even believe it if they said they were a pile of mud. After the grayish-brown surface was removed, the things that appeared on the table were the same as described above, except for the two things that were still in a messy shape. The rest of them could be roughly recognized. They had the aura of ancient times, and the strong aura of time hit them in the face. These things were really very old. They had been deposited in the passage of time, and even ordinary people could easily feel the antiquity of these things. After looking at them one by one, Yin Nuashing shook her head. The energy has all disappeared. Even if they used to be weapons, they are now too damaged to be used. What I can be sure of is that since the energy will disappear with the passage of time, everything will be corroded by time in the end. These things have nothing to do with divine weapons and divine weapons. The quality of eternal divine weapons and above will not be corroded by time. Among weapons, except for eternal divine weapons, and weapons of higher grades, which could be preserved for eternity due to materials and various reasons. All other weapons would gradually disappear in the long river of time. First, the energy would disappear, and then the various structures would collapse. Finally, the core would be extinguished. Once the core lost its power, the weapon would become completely useless. It could only be recycled by weight. Repairing it would not be easier than making another one. But I can be sure that these things should have come from the same person. There's still a very weak aura on them. Probably the spiritual deity you mentioned, said Little White. The elder of the dark cloud celestial race glanced at Xiao Xian, who immediately tensed up. But after a while, she slowly relaxed as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, the elder couldn't help but sigh secretly. In the end, she couldn't stand it anymore and went out of the pavilion. She felt that she would go crazy if she looked at them a few more times. Now that things had come to this, there was nothing more. These ancient weapons were just a catalyst. They had already played most of their roles. Through them, they had already deduced the final destination, and the task had already been completed. Yin Nuoxing dissected them one by one out of curiosity. In the end, he didn't get any more useful information. He pondered for a while and stuffed them back into the holy grade glazed crystal. He even carefully sewed the crack with his energy. It was impossible to tell that this holy grade glazed crystal had been dissected before. He used a special method to make it whole. In fact, it was restored to its original state. Why did you seal it back? Yin Nuoxing was doing delicate handiwork. When she heard Little White's question, she couldn't help but look up at him and sighed. I didn't get any value from it. If I didn't, it's a sealed, ancient weapon. Little White. Oh my God. It's worth collecting. We know that others don't know about it. If it's useless, we can sell it and let others collect it. Yin Nuoxing said matter-of-factly. This thing is much more valuable if it's sealed without others knowing about it than if it's opened. This isn't a scam. This is a godly scam, a heavenly scam. Little White spat out a mouthful of tea. Ignore him. Take it back. If your clan wants to collect it, you can keep it. If you don't want to keep it, you can sell it. After all, it's really useless. All the energy, all the rules, all the karma. It doesn't matter if it existed in the past or not. At least there's nothing left now. It's useless to keep it, Yin Nuoxing said to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian smiled bitterly. However, this was something left behind by the last heavenly god of the Goblin clan. Even if it was useless. Anyway, she would keep it first. She knew what she was going to do with it. The others in her clan would definitely not sell it. Most likely, they would bring it back to their clan and keep it as a pile of broken stones to collect dust. We're going to God Falls Sky tomorrow. If there's nothing else, go wash up and sleep. Yin Nuoxing yawned. Although he said he was going to rest, it was actually another night of meditation. Even he couldn't solve that eternal nightmare. Xian and Feng, or seem to be in the spiritual world now. It seems like I can sleep for a long time. When Yin Nuoxing thought of this, he inexplicably felt happy for a moment. Then, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why would he feel happy for such an ordinary thing? The border of the God realm had always been a mysterious area. However, it wasn't mysterious at all. It appeared mysterious purely because not many people had been there. High-level gods and other powerful beings wanted to leave the God realm and go directly to the star field through the teleportation gate. No one would be bored enough to fly out from the border of this flat continent. The God realm is surrounded by many forbidden spatial spells and other things, making it look like a normal world. However, there's one area that is different. Yin Nuoxing turned his finger and pointed at the realm of the gods shown on the treasure map. He circled around the edge of the realm of the gods and said, about 10,000 to 30,000 miles away from the edge of the realm of the gods, you will be able to see the true view of the realm of the gods. That is probably a special arrangement. Who knows? If you look in all directions from that circle, you will be able to see a boundless galaxy, regardless of day or night. Furthermore, there is no difference between day and night in that place. Demon King City is similar to many of the cities in the border zone. It's very close to the border zone. However, among the 4 major regions, Only the border cities in the ultimate plain region are the furthest from a border zone. Of course, that's probably because there aren't many cities in the ultimate plain region. Yin Nuashing paused for a moment before smiling mysteriously. However, there's a place that we're quite familiar with at the border 30,000 miles away. Oh, you might not be familiar with it. What place? Xiao Xian and Mei Mao's eyes shone brightly. Yin Nuashing grinned. It's located outside of all the forbidden zones. In the entire God realm, it's the place that's the closest to the border of death. In fact, it's the place that's spreading its wings, the Nightwalker Alliance. Xiao Bai and Lan Xian, heads fell. They had forgotten about that. Was it because they hadn't dealt with the Nightwalker Alliance for a while? Now, when they entered the Forbidden Zones, they directly charged in. Whether it was the abyss of elements or the burial ground of heaven, there was actually a foothold established by the Nightwalker Alliance. They weren't too far away, but they weren't very close either. They were roughly between 10,000 miles and 35 to 35,000 miles away. Those footholds were relatively small, equivalent to a small town. They were used as footholds for travelers or those who wanted to go to the Forbidden Zones to seek out death. Because the members of the Nightwalker Alliance could go anywhere, they would often collect some mystical items that would make people jealous. There were only 5 people on this trip. Other than Yin Nuashing and the other 3, only one elder of the Dark Cloud Immortal clan came along. The others stayed in Demon King City. The one who came along was the elder they met last night. Along the way, he stared at Yin Nuashing with a vigilant gaze. However, the latter didn't care at all. After all, Xiao Xian, well, she was a character between a pet and a family member. She seemed to think so too. Although she was a goddess of a clan, she unexpectedly didn't care much about these things. At this point, Yin Nuashing didn't care too much about whether she was exposed or not. She gradually became more and more unscrupulous in doing things. She directly rushed at the speed of light. In just an hour, they arrived at the foothold established by the Nightwalker Alliance. When a slightly shabby but neat little town appeared in front of them, they all sighed. Although it was small, it had all the essentials. This simple little town was also set up with defensive fortifications. There was a protective formation hidden under the town. There were also many shops inside. Most people who had secondary professions could find the supplies they needed here. Yin Nuashing and the others were just here to settle down and look at the God-falling sky from 10,000 miles away. Wow, this place is really as Little Star said. Xiao Xian raised her head in surprise. It was still daytime, but the sky was filled with twinkling stars. A huge cluster of light hung above their heads. It was incomparably bright. Although the sky was black and it seemed like night, the surroundings didn't seem dark at all. It was as if this place shared the sunlight of the day with other places. When one raised their head, they could see the starry sky at night. The sky was filled with twinkling stars. It was extremely dazzling. Rich starlight descended and fell on Yin Nuashing's body. The spirit receiving godly body started operating on its own again, slowly absorbing countless starlight into his body. His body lit up again. From time to time, a ball of rich starlight half the size of a fist would float out like a group of fireflies. In the Nightwalker Alliance's small town, the human race and the demon race mixed together. They lived together peacefully. Yin Nuashing slightly used her soul force to sense that there was actually an Emperor God powerhouse overseeing this place. Although he was only an early Emperor God, he was still a powerhouse who could intimidate a region. Oh, God-falling sky. Yin Nuashing looked into the distance and saw the God-falling sky thousands of miles away. But when he looked in, his vision suddenly turned dark. He was slightly startled. After a moment, he calmed down. He frowned and opened his evil spirit eye. In the end, he could only see a black and white image. It seemed that he hadn't woken up yet. His eyes were misty, and he couldn't see clearly. He could only see a mountain range and nothing else. What's in a God-falling sky? Yin Nuashing tilted her head and asked the elder of the Dark Cloud Immortal clan. The Emperor God Elder shook his head. I once stopped at the edge of the God-falling sky and looked into it. I can see many things if I look at it from a close distance, but I can't see anything if I use my god origin or soul force. We don't know what's in the god-falling sky. Once I even sensed the aura of a king of the demon race. Her beautiful face palpitated. She still had an impression of that aura. It was irresistible and irresistible. The only thing she could do was to kneel down. The super strong pressure that spread from her bloodline made her unable to move. That's probably the aura of a transcendent divine beast expert when he's holed up in there. It could also be the aura of a dying transcendent divine beast. Anyway, there's no evidence that this aura has anything to do with the four celestial gods. Yin Nuoxing snapped her fingers and thought seriously. After walking around the small town for a while, she heard that many people were standing at the edge of the god-falling sky and looking into it. She also heard that several mysterious people had joined forces to break into the god-falling sky. Yin Nuoxing thought about it for less than 5 minutes. She waved her hand and said, "Forget it. Let's go in first." Chapter 1044. At the edge of the Nightwalker Alliance's town, Yin Nuoxing and the others were slowly heading toward the godfall sky. Strange beasts roared around them, and a group of people riding strange beasts rushed out of the town. There were about 30 of them, and they were only 10 feet high in the air. Dust billowed as they rushed toward the godfall sky. Little White heard the commotion and turned around. He squinted his eyes when he saw a mouthful of dust. He was instantly enraged. He looked at the strange beasts in the distance and suddenly snorted. Roar! Woo! The 30-odd strange beasts suddenly trembled and fell from the sky to the ground. The riders didn't even have time to react and fell flat on their faces. They scrambled to their feet in a sorry state and saw their mounts curled up on the ground. They looked at each other in dismay, only to find it baffling. The immortal ritual elder of the Dark Cloud celestial race looked at Little White seriously. She had clearly sensed a fluctuation that made her heart palpitate from this young man's body. It was as if she was facing an abyss that made her blood and divine origin tremble and almost stop circulating. When she saw the group of strange beasts fall to the ground in front of her, she was even more confused. She couldn't help but ask. That was Little White snorted and crossed his arms. His tail and ears shook gently. A group of mixed-blood demonic beasts dared to fly over my head. They must be tired of living. Yin Nuoxing knocked on his head and smiled at the immortal ritual elder. Don't mind him. This child likes to put on airs. Well, when you know that he has the blood of a sacred beast, you'll probably understand why he likes to put on airs. The immortal ritual elder's expression trembled slightly. The blood of a sacred beast? No wonder there was such a strong pressure. That pressure from the bloodline almost made her unable to move. She recalled the feeling when she faced the aura of the godfall sky that day. Little White grinned at her, revealing 2 shiny canine teeth. Yin Nuoxing shook his head helplessly. Anyway, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The 4 celestial phenomenon gods had their own arrogance. Feng couldn't be bothered with them. Little White had directly shaken them down, but he couldn't be bothered either. After all, this had nothing to do with him. When they passed by the group of strange beasts, the group of 30 or so people were still standing in place, staring at them helplessly. A few of them tried to whip the strange beasts, shouting and cursing at them, but the strange beasts were all huddled up on the ground, shivering. No matter what they did, they refused to stand up, as if they had yet to recover from the shock of Little White's power. There seems to be a lot of people going to the godfall sky recently, Yin Nuoxing said faintly after they were far away. Based on the information we've gathered so far, apart from a few mysterious people who have entered the godfall sky, there have been about 20 groups of people who have entered the godfall sky, including the group we just saw. Little White grabbed Yin Nuoxing's hand, took out some precious medicinal herbs from 2 rings, and stuffed them into her mouth like snacks. Then, she said vaguely, but most of them are watching from the edge of the godfall sky. I don't think there's any news from those who went deeper into the godfall sky. Xiao Xian stared at the spiritual herbs in Little White's hand. Mei Mao blinked. Yin Nuoxing saw this and smiled helplessly. He waved his hand and took out a spiritual herb that was close to 10 million years old and stuffed it into Xiao Xian's mouth. Xiao Xian grabbed it and stuffed it into her mouth. Yin Nuoxing was stunned by her eagerness. Only now did he remember that the demonic beasts of the Yao clan seemed to like eating spiritual herbs that contained huge amounts of energy. Oh, I forgot that you two like to eat spiritual herbs. Yin Nuoxing looked at the two of them, and her face twitched. The spiritual herbs in Little White and Xiao Xian's hands were extremely precious. Their ages were frighteningly high. Although the spiritual herbs that were 10 million years old didn't really mean that they had lived for 10 million years, it was just a saying that represented the level of energy they contained. However, it was a fact that they had existed for many years. Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and turned to Elder Xianyi. Elder, do you want them? Elder Xianyi's face twitched, and her face twisted slightly. Do you want to keep me as a pet too? Oh, I'm just asking casually. If you don't want them, then forget it. Yin Nuoxing turned around calmly, and she was speechless. Even though she knew that she was special, she had never been ignored by a demigod before. She was a demon the Arch after all. How could she be ignored like this? It was as if her realm didn't exist. The few of them walked on the road for a while, and the people who were still around when they left the town suddenly disappeared. Looking around, the starry sky occupied the horizon. Everywhere they looked, they could see the bright stars. It seems like some people are more daring. They're actually so close. Yin Nuoxing pointed to the side of the road. Quite far to the right, there was a camp. Elder Xianyi glanced at it and said calmly, "Those are the other races that have been stationed outside the Godfall sky all year round. They have been coveting the Godfall sky for a long time. Ever since they sensed the aura of the demon the Arch, it has been like this. Rumor has it that there is an item of the demon the Arch inside. It has been a long time, but they haven't given up yet. They have also sealed off the Godfall sky to prevent others from getting close." Speaking of this, she glanced at Yin Nuoxing and smiled. What she meant was, under such circumstances, how are you going to enter the Godfall sky? Yin Nuoxing raised her head and thought for a while. She didn't say anything. She just smiled faintly. After a few minutes, they walked for another 100 miles. They were already very close to the Godfall sky. After another minute of walking, they would probably enter the Godfall sky. Those camps were also quite close to their path. They were less than 2 miles away in a straight line. Suddenly, 2 figures emerged from those camps and rushed toward them. "Stop! It's forbidden to pass through this place." The 2 middle-level gods shouted. Yin Nuoxing frowned. She didn't expect them to be as domineering as Elder Xianyi had said. Many people must have entered the Godfall sky. Not to mention other times, even in the past 10 days, some people had come. However, those who came here seemed to have tacitly agreed that this road at the edge of the area was sealed off by some demon the Arch. Of course, there were other roads that could be taken. Those places could be bypassed by the demon the Arch and sneaked in quietly. The demon the Arch wouldn't care about those places, but they wouldn't allow anyone to enter the Godfall sky through this place. However, she was too lazy to go around it. She had heard that it would take another 2 hours to walk. Their blockade was quite long. The 2 middle-level gods landed in front of her and said with gloomy faces, "This place is forbidden. If you want to enter the Godfall sky, go in from the other side." Yin Nuoxing stopped and glanced at them. She sighed softly and said, "Can't we enter from here? Cut the crap. This is the rule that has been set for tens of thousands of years. Turn back quickly." The middle-level god shouted. Lan Xin frowned. The holy vitality in her body was about to surge out. However, from the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Yin Nuoxing's strange smile. She calmed her holy vitality that was about to surge out. Yin Nuoxing nodded. She lowered her left hand and gently snapped her fingers. She opened her mouth and said, a strange fluctuation quietly spread out, and the space within a radius of 100 miles seemed to distort inconspicuously. Then, the eyes of the 2 mid-level gods suddenly became confused, and their bodies swayed. It took them a while to come back to their senses. Why did we run out? One of the middle-level gods asked the other one curiously. They seemed to be guarding the gate. I don't know. Let's not talk about this. Let's go back quickly. We are guarding the gate today. It won't be good if someone sneaks in. The other one shook his head blankly. He waved his hand and hurriedly flew back to the camp. The other one hurriedly followed. If this intersection wasn't so close to the center, our Blood Wolf tribe wouldn't have spent so much effort to seal off the Godfall sky. We can't rest here. Stop complaining. Why don't you pray that the experts of our tribe will find that thing soon? Then we can go back to our tribe. We don't have to stay in this barren place. Seeing the two of them coming over aggressively and then retreating with a dumbfounded expression, the few of them widened their eyes. The immortal ritual elder opened her mouth and looked at Yin Nuashing in confusion. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Yin Nuashing shook her head and grinned. We have never been here before. Naturally, we didn't do anything. They didn't find anything either. In the end, they still had to go back to guard the gate. The immortal ritual elder felt that something was wrong. She recalled the distortion of space just now and said with a surprised tone, "Did you just distort the rules or cause an effect?" "Then what is it?" Yin Nuashing smiled faintly and continued walking forward. There were many campsites nearby, but no one came to stop them along the way. The closest campsite was so close that no one paid them any attention, even when they passed by within 10 feet of the other campsite. Those who stood guard at the entrance scanned the surroundings with eagle-like eyes, but they did not notice them. Lan Xin blinked. She knew what Yin Nuashing had done. Of course, she could understand the language of the gods. It was just a very common sentence, 5 very common words. We don't exist. However, it was these 5 words that affected the rules of heaven and earth's judgment of them. Other than them, no one else could clearly sense them. This seemed to be a trick of the post-god level. She had heard him talk about it occasionally. Moreover, the language of the gods had a great influence on the rules of heaven and earth. That language was too profound, and every word contained a lot of meaning. I just heard them say that this road is the closest to the center. Xiaoxian turned around and looked at the camps in the distance. Then, she looked at Yin Nuashing and said, I heard them say that this road is the closest to the center. Yin Nuashing stroked her long hair and said calmly, Probably. I think there is something hidden on the road from this intersection to the center. They can't get it for now, but they don't want others to know about it. So they sealed this road. Are we not going to use the array this time? Lan Xianer asked. Yin Nuashing narrowed her eyes and sensed for a while. They had already entered the boundaries of the Godfall sky. However, they didn't sense any terrifying energy reaction. The rules of heaven and earth here were also, for now, they were relatively calm. There were no signs of distortion, and she didn't sense any distortion of the origin energy. So, for now, we should be safe. However, just in case, I should still use a layer of defense. As Yin Nuashing spoke, he took out a scroll from his pendant and opened it gently. With a flash of light, a thin, almost transparent barrier enveloped the area of 10 feet around them. After putting away the scroll, Yin Nuashing looked at Little White. She patted his head and said, It's your turn now. Find the right time. Let me try. Little White grinned. He didn't feel confident. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Strands of mysterious energy undulation spread out. When he tried to find the azure dragon and the black tortoise, a deep blue color appeared in Yin Nuashing's eyes. In the end, she realized that the space in the distance was still blurry and dark. She couldn't help but frown. She opened her evil spirit eye as well. In the end, she still couldn't see anything. She was a little happy. Just as she was about to use a more powerful method to penetrate the mysterious barrier, Little White opened his eyes. A ray of blue light flashed in his eyes. He suddenly jumped up. He couldn't hide the joy on his face. However, after the joy, Little White's little face frowned. He stretched out his hand and pointed at 2 places with uncertainty. I can sense these 2 places, but only one of them is the azure dragon and the others. As for the other one, I think... He turned to look at Xiaoxian. The other one might be the heavenly god of the demonic clan that was born last. Oh, are you sure? Little Qing and the others are in there? Yin Nuashing looked at him with a little surprise. She then looked into the distance. It can't be wrong. It definitely can't be wrong this time. All the senses are coming from the front. Furthermore, this is the westernmost part of the westernmost part. It's close to the edge of the realm of the gods. There's no place further to the west, so it can't be wrong. Little White nodded with an unusually serious expression. He was just short of raising 3 fingers to swear that there would be no problem this time. Elder Sien, he was completely dumbfounded, especially when she heard the name of the 4 celestial gods. However, when she saw that her goddess didn't have any special reaction, she held it in and didn't ask anything. Yin Nuoxing twirled her long hair. After thinking for a moment, she pointed at one of the places that Little White mentioned and said, "Then let's go there first. Based on my feeling, this should be the right place." Little White spread out his hands. The 2 places seemed to be quite close to each other. However, he felt that there should be a certain distance between the 2 places where they would arrive at the end. Yin Nuoxing walked in front. Xiao Xian and Lan Xian followed beside her. Elder Xian, he was 1 to 2 meters behind them. This was to deal with any unexpected situations that might occur behind them. As for the matters in front, they would leave it to Elder Xian for the time being. In her opinion, that young man was too mysterious. Even though her goddess had explained some things to him, it was still the same. The 5 of them walked and stopped. Yin Nuoxing walked for a while and stopped occasionally. She stood at the edge of a small hill and looked into the distance with her hands behind her back. Even though the small hill was less than 20 meters tall, they were still in the starry sky. It was a vast galaxy with countless stars. The starlight that shone on this place was boundless. Yin Nuoxing subconsciously felt that the brightness of her body seemed to have decreased. The starlight that was originally gathered on her body dissipated in all directions. The layer of light that was originally 1 meter thick became less than half a meter thick. The power of the stars seems to have been attracted by something. Yin Nuoxing looked behind her intentionally. At this moment, they were about 400 to 500 miles away from the edge of the god-falling sky. For the time being, she did not see anything. "Do you feel anything?" Yin Nuoxing clenched her fists and looked up at the galaxy. Lan Xian, and Xiao Xian shook their heads. They did not feel anything special after entering the god-falling sky. Little White would calibrate their direction after walking for a while. At this moment, they were still proceeding according to the direction they had chosen at the beginning. In another direction, there was a very obvious deviation. It was obvious that they were not going the same way. The flow of our divine essence seems to be a little sluggish. Elder Xian, he also clenched her fists. She felt that something was amiss. Yin Nuoxing nodded. She also felt the same. However, Lan Xian, and the rest obviously did not feel the same. She did not know what this situation was for. After advancing for another 300 miles, the 5 of them stood in front of a 10,000-foot wide abyss that suddenly appeared in front of them. They could not help but stare into the abyss. Gulp, gulp, rumble. Some strange, muffled sounds came from the abyss. It sounded as if a huge beast was sleeping here. It also sounded as if there was a strange sound of energy exploding. Hearing it made one's hair stand on end. Yin Nuoxing tried to look at the bottom of the abyss. However, when she opened her other eyes, she still could not see anything. This place seemed to have an absolute suppression effect on some probing techniques. The rest of them also tried, but it was the same. If they wanted to take a look at the bottom of the abyss, they could only jump in. Let's go around it. The wind element in this place has disappeared. The energy of the other elements is also almost exhausted. The energy that we brought with us has been used up. We will not be able to replenish it for a while. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we should use it sparingly. Yin Nuoxing twisted his neck. After walking for 800 miles, it was temporarily peaceful. Or rather, it was too peaceful. It seems too quiet. Lan Xian frowned and said what Yin Nuoxing was thinking. Last time, when we were in the sky burial ground, there was one situation every 3 steps. Why is this fallen god sky so quiet? Didn't they say that there was a sacred bee suppression? Immortal Ritual Elder pondered for a while. That aura should not be there all the time. If it was there all the time, the camps at the edge would not have been left. As long as a trace of that aura was released, the people of the Yao clan would not be able to withstand it. Under the oppression of the sacred beast, they would die. But this place is really desolate. Xiaobai held the back of his head with both hands and sighed. At least there was a vast star field in the sky, but the ground, it was a desolate land. The mountains and rivers were desolate. There was not a trace of green. The ground was dark and lifeless. Even living in this place is a problem. The aura of life is so thin. It is so thin that it is frightening. If an ordinary person walked in, their life force would be stripped away. If there was no barrier, we would have at least lost a third of our life force before we could react. The sky burial ground is also very desolate, but there is something there to suppress it, so it is not like this. But the twisted rules there are reflected on the surface. If you walk in without protection, you will die immediately. Xiaobai said, "Are all the forbidden areas like this? Desolate, dry, desolate, and lifeless. There is nothing. Why would such a place be formed?" Lan Xin murmured. These places were too ominous and lifeless. Not many people like to come to these places. Yin Nuoxing looked up and said, "Forbidden zones, forbidden zones, forbidden zones of life." As the name suggests, how could there be any life in these places? There aren't even many traces of life. These places are caused by the laws of the realm of gods changing during its evolution. However, it's not that the laws of the realm of gods are wrong. It's just a form of abnormality that caused the places covered by the laws of the realm of gods to become strange and deformed. Most normal life forms would not be able to survive in these places, but since the laws of the realm of gods aren't wrong, they wouldn't be automatically fixed. Since no one knows how to fix them, they've been left there, and as time passed, they became forbidden zones with strange laws that no one cared about. Most of the forbidden areas were formed because of mistakes in the rules. The only difference is that they were man-made and formed naturally. Some of the forbidden areas have other reasons. A gust of wind blew, and the gray sand rolled and jumped on the ground. A strange sound came from afar, and the ground trembled faintly. However, Yun Nuoxing and the immortal ritual elder sensed something in advance. They turned their heads together and looked in the direction they had come from. They squinted their eyes slightly. At the end of the horizon, a red line appeared. It stretched out for a very long time. No one knew where it came from. At that moment, Yin Nuoxing thought, if he saw a white line at the end of the horizon on the surface of the sea, it would be a little fun. Therefore, it was quite fun at this moment. The only difference was that the line was red. Rumble, the heavy sound of the ground, took a long time to reach them. Yin Nuoxing and the immortal ritual elder trembled. They turned their heads and saw the red line that connected the sky and the earth. They all shuddered. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand calmly and said, "Run." Chapter 1045. The blood-red demonic light covered heaven and earth, and the sound of rolling waves mixed with the stench of blood came from the horizon, flattening everything in sight. The terrifying blood-red demonic light dyed half of the star sector scarlet, and the power in the air was ominous and terrifying. The rolling momentum made one's scalp go numb. Yin Nuoxing had just finished speaking when she suddenly stretched out her hands and carried Xiao Xian and Lan Xin in her hands. She then wrapped Xiaobai in her wings and shouted softly. Light elements surged, and in a flash they rushed across the 1,000-foot-wide abyss in front of them. The immortal ritual elder also jumped over. What is that? Xiaobai turned around to look at the monstrous blood-red waves, and her pupils shrank to the size of a needle. What was this blood-red wave that suddenly appeared in this godforsaken place? The bloody aura that rushed to the sky and carried a stench that made one vomit, as if it was real blood. You're asking me? Yin Nuoxing's face stiffened into a strange smile. She shook her head and said, I can only give you the answer that I can discern. That is probably the blood of thousands or tens of thousands of extremely powerful demonic beasts. Oh, I don't think this is the time to talk about this. She had just finished speaking when she hurriedly retreated with the other three. The immortal ritual elder looked at the blood-red wave behind her and hurriedly retreated as well, quickly entering the depths of the godfall sky. Isn't there an abyss there? It should be able to block the blood wave, right? Xiaobai clung to the edge of her wings and looked out. It's hard to say. The immortal ritual elder shook her head and said, if we can't block it and get sucked into the blood wave, we don't know what will happen. The divine essence that we detected instantly evaporated upon contact with the blood wave. If that is really the blood wave of thousands or tens of thousands of powerful demonic beasts mixed together. Her expression was solemn, and she unconsciously swallowed her saliva. In any case, it will be bad if we get sucked in. Yin Nuoxing also nodded. Xiao Bai and the other two saw that she had the same reaction and did not say anything. They only looked back at the shocking blood wave from time to time. At this moment, the blood wave had already rushed to the abyss, and in an instant, there was a violent collision. Bang! Boom! The huge sound of the blood wave crashing against the mountain wall on the other side of the abyss shook the earth, and the sound of splashing water reverberated between the heavens and the earth. The blood wave created by the collision was tens of thousands of feet tall, and a small part of it split apart in the air, turning into a rain of blood that fell on the earth. In the blood wave, one could see some white bones that were thousands of feet tall, and there were also some golden bones that were as large as small mountains. They looked as if they had been swept out from the depths of the mountains by the blood wave. Boom! The giant wolf that was tens of thousands of feet tall fell from the sky and slammed into the ground on the other side of the river. Waves splashed everywhere and then flowed into the abyss. When Yin Nuoxing and the others saw this, they stopped and heaved a sigh of relief. Just as they were about to put down the three fellows that they were carrying in their hands and wrapped in their wings, an even louder roar suddenly came from the place where the blood light filled the sky. The few of them were stunned and looked at it in confusion for a few seconds. Then, an exaggeratedly huge blood pillar burst out from the abyss and shot into the sky. That blood pillar was tens of thousands of feet tall. After a while, huge blood pillars also burst out from other parts of the abyss. From afar, it looked like a blood wall that was tens of thousands of feet tall. When Yin Nuoxing and the others saw this, they sucked in a breath of cold air, and an ominous feeling rose in their hearts. Boom! Quong! Gulp! The strange sound from the abyss sounded again. It was dull, and it seemed to be coming from the ground. It was as if the entire ground was making this strange sound. The blood wall that was tens of thousands of feet tall slowly collapsed from the sky, collapsing toward the other side of the abyss. F***CKU. Seeing that the blood wall was showing signs of collapsing, Yin Nuoxing instantly ran away. She did not even have time to put down the person she was carrying. Elder Immortal Ritual also hurriedly followed her. They were really looking for trouble, forcefully allowing the blood sea to sweep them to the other side. Fortunately, they had already retreated a distance away and were not swept into the blood sea. Crash! The collapsing blood wall slammed against the ground, creating an even bigger blood wave. It was relatively close to Yin Nuoxing and the others. If they stopped for 1 or 2 seconds, they would be instantly swept into the blood wave behind them. Furthermore, the blood wave was gradually increasing in speed. Sensing the terrifying aura that was gradually catching up behind them, Yin Nuoxing's face twitched slightly. She angrily shouted, F***CK? It's about to catch up. I don't care anymore. Are you planning to? Elder Immortal Ritual was also stunned. She tilted her head to look at him. Before she knew what he was planning to do, she was swept over by a wing. Then, a surge of bright golden particles filled her vision. The energy caused her pupils to contract slightly. This was the light element. The light element swept the 5 of them in a flash, and they disappeared from their original positions in an instant. Apart from Yin Nuoxing, the 5 of them had their eyes tightly closed. By the time they reacted, they had already landed on the ground. Yin Nuoxing turned around. They were currently standing on a mountain range, extremely far away from the blood wave. The light element swept them across an extremely long distance, and the blood wave could not catch up. It would stop halfway. He was not looking at the blood wave, but at the almost invisible abyss. Above the abyss, Yin Nuoxing could vaguely see a figure. That figure had his hands behind his back, looking up at the starry sky. His back view was desolate and lonely. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the figure. After a long time, he sighed softly. If you're sleeping, then just sleep. Why are you doing these strange things? No one will disturb you. He had thought that this blood wave was the same as the blood river under the abyss that they had seen when they had just arrived at the ultimate plane region. What's that? What strange thing did you see again? Little White could not help but ask in his soul when she saw him like this. Yin Nuashing shook his head, and the voice of his soul was softly heard. It's nothing. It's just an old guy who was in a deep sleep. He might have sensed something strange about me and mysteriously woke up for a moment. After all, I also have some weak godly power on my body. He probably sensed it. Now, he's probably asleep. Don't worry about him. Another heavenly deity? Lon Sheener was a little speechless. Could he be so lucky to meet another divine god? Speaking of which, he always met so many sleeping divine gods and divine gods. Was this good luck or bad luck? Xiao Xian wrinkled her nose and said in his soul, but didn't Little White say that there were only 2 high-energy senses in the Godfall sky? Little Qing and the others have not been found in this direction. The one who is said to be the divine god is not in this direction? Yin Nuashing nodded. The sleeping god can't sense it. The only possibility is that there's something in that place that contains a lot of energy. Little White must have sensed it. Furthermore, he might have sensed wrongly. This white tiger that suffered from heat stroke hasn't been in the pit for a day or 2. Little White ground her shiny teeth and stared at him maliciously. I'm definitely not wrong this time. Yin Nuashing shrugged and spread his hands. He looked at Xiao Xian and pondered for a while. Then he said, Xiao Xian, there are some things that I have wanted to say for a long time. Xiao Xian and Mei Mao stared at him intently. Yin Nuashing turned around and said, the whereabouts of a divine god cannot be divined by anyone other than a divine god. Even if they can find the place where they are buried, it will not be through divining. The laws of causality on their bodies can shield them from prying methods. Xiao Xian was stunned. But the divine master of my clan is indeed. Yin Nuashing waved his hand, indicating that he hadn't finished yet. There's only one situation. That sky god is in a half-dead state, and all kinds of origin powers are not very stable. At that time, it is possible to deduce some things related to them from other things. As for the rest, I don't think I need to say more. Xiao Xian's eyes widened in shock. If that was the case, did it mean that the divine god could still exist in this world? Moreover, it was very likely that she was in the Godfall sky. Perhaps she was in the other place that Xiao Bai had mentioned. Yin Nuashing turned his head and looked into the distance. The surroundings were still empty and very quiet. The blood-red wave did not spread over, but the ground in front of him was dark red, as if it had been tainted by the blood-red wave. The entire horizon in the distance was burning with green flames that rushed into the sky, like a few huge fire tornadoes that swept into the sky. We are very close to the edge of the realm of the gods. I can already feel the aura of the stars. The barrier that covers the entire realm of the gods is not far ahead. Yin Nuashing clenched his fists. A powerful aura rippled and filled the air. That aura caused Elder Xian Yi's body to stiffen. That's the aura of a demon king. It's not the one I felt before. But why can I still move? She turned around blankly and looked at Yin Nuashing. The latter pointed at the almost transparent barrier. She immediately understood. So it was this energy barrier that had blocked that powerful aura. Space and time are normal. There are signs of instability in the laws. I suspect that they're affected by a powerful energy. If we continue forward, I don't know if we will be affected by anything for the time being. Yin Nuashing looked at the ground in front of them and the green flames in the distance and calmly said what he had observed. However, it's not surprising that anything can happen in the forbidden area. There is no turning back now that we are here. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and turned to look at the 4 of them. He said softly, let's continue forward. We will be fine as long as we don't leave the barrier. However, we should still be careful ahead. The others nodded. Yin Nuashing took the lead and jumped down from the mountain range. The elemental energy in this place was thin. He had just brought the others and sprinted for a short distance. He had used up 1/5 of his light element and had yet to replenish it. Furthermore, he did not know what would happen ahead. It's never wrong to be careful when walking in the forbidden area. Although I can use a special method to convert my star energy into elemental energy at a ratio of 1:1, there is no way to replenish the energy in this place. I feel that it is a waste to use some herbs. Yin Nuashing spread his hands. He also knew how to be frugal. Even if he had many things in his storage that ordinary people could not see, he would still feel heartache if he casually used them. After all, there were some things that could not be found in this era. Every time he used them, he would have less of them. They walked as fast as flying. Even though they had already cautiously slowed down, with their strength, they could travel several dozen kilometers in a few minutes. Soon after, Yin Nuashing suddenly stopped and looked to the side. Their half of a mountain range had been forcibly torn apart. Green flames were lingering around half of the mountain, continuously melting the mountain range. In the distance, green magma could be seen. That was the mountain rocks that had been melted by the green flames. They flowed on the ground, giving off steam. Yin Nuashing walked over with a frown. A layer of multicolored radiance surged on his palm. He lightly touched the magma that was still giving off terrifying steam. His frown deepened. The remnant energy is still quite fresh. This energy was left behind recently. It hasn't even been 3 days and has yet to dissipate. Someone is here? Immortal Ritual Elder also frowned. Feeling this energy at such a close distance, she should have trembled. However, with this layer of barrier, she did not lose her composure. She only frowned slightly. It's hard to say, whether it's a human or a demon, who knows? Yin Nuashing shook his head. He waved his hand and continued to walk forward. However, this energy is indeed Little Qing's energy. Little White, do you think Little Qing and the others have lost their memories of their previous lives? Yin Nuashing looked at Little White and asked. Little White was stunned. He roughly knew what he was worried about. It's hard for me to say. After we broke free from Yu Ying's seal, our vitality was greatly damaged for a period of time. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be enough to kill us. Moreover, the 3 of us were unconscious at that time. We don't know where we went to hide and recuperate. After muttering to himself for a while, he shook his head, unless they encountered something when they were resting and were ambushed. They were severely injured and on the verge of death. Otherwise, they shouldn't have lost their memories. Yin Nuashing nodded and continued to walk forward. They saw another piece of land that was being burned by green flames. The continuous mountain range was completely enveloped by a circle of green flames. That was the circle of flames that they saw from afar. The burning green flames rose thousands of miles into the sky and formed a terrifying wall of fire. It seemed to penetrate deep into the star sector. Lan Xian wiped away her sweat. Although this barrier could block the destruction caused by the high energy and could also isolate the destructive heat waves, it could not isolate the surrounding temperature. Waves of hot wind blew towards them, causing them to sweat profusely. Yin Nuashing stomped his feet lightly and activated another array to cover this area. After isolating the extremely high temperature, the few of them heaved a sigh of relief. If they stayed here for too long, they might be roasted alive. There! Xiao Xian's eyes lit up. She stretched out her jade finger and pointed at the bottom of a short mountain. There was also a pool of flowing lava. Moreover, the surrounding area was already covered with lava. More than half of the mountains had melted, and the flowing lava had formed a lava lake. At the bottom of the short mountain, there was a white skeleton. It was being burned by the green flames, but it was not extinguished. Yin Nuashing was slightly surprised. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that the white skeleton was just an ordinary skeleton. It was not the skeleton of a god. Judging from the remaining weak energy, the owner of the skeleton was at most a mid-level god when he was alive. He looked at it for a while and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, he waved his hand, and a ball of light floated out from the skeleton. After the ball of light left the skeleton was burned to ashes and disappeared. He called the ball of light into his hand and looked inside. Xiao Xian and the others also came over and looked inside curiously. A token? There's a very powerful charm in it. Xiao Bai narrowed his eyes. There was a token in the ball of light. The token itself might not be anything special, but there was a very high-level charm engraved on it. It was this charm that had blocked the destructive green flames. A god level 9. No, this smell, it is above a god level charm. This is a god level charm. No wonder it could block Xiao Qing's flames. Yin Nuoxing's eyes lit up. Xiao Qing's flames were the same level as foam, Er's true phoenix fire. If they were on the list, they would be ranked 15th. However, Xiao Qing's flames were hers, and others could not obtain them. Therefore, it was not listed on the list. Foam, Er's flames were different. The true phoenix fire could be obtained by others, and only 2 people could control the true phoenix fire at the same time. If one did not have a soul contract with the phoenix, it was impossible to control this kind of flame. For example, at this moment, he could use this flame that could burn everything because of the soul contract. God level, Lan Xian murmured. Mei Mao narrowed her eyes and thought of something. Brother Nuoxing, could it be those peoples? Those people? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. 2 seconds later, she reacted. Oh, you mean those descendants of the deities? We can't rule out this possibility. God-level charms are rare, and they can't be sold on the market. Even if they do exist, they are the treasures of some big sects, and they would not be taken out casually. If they were taken out, brought here, and died here, the possibility is very high. Could it be those mysterious people who entered the Godfall sky a few days ago that we heard in the small town? As Little White spoke, her eyes suddenly became dangerous. In other words, a deity or a descendant of a deity is plotting something to kill Azure Dragon and the others, or to subdue them. A low and deep tiger roar came from his throat. When Yin Nuoxing heard it, he knocked his head and said, "Calm down, little Qing will be fine. Other than the methods of the divine rank, nothing can hurt them. Back then, you were knocked unconscious by me and foam, with our full strength." Xiaobai rolled his eyes. Why did he have to bring up what happened back then? Look here. Elder Xian, he waved at them from the side. Yin Nuoxing and the others hurriedly ran over and squatted down to take a look. On the ground that Elder Xian he was pointing at, there were dozens of burnt black marks on the ground. Moreover, they were burnt very cleanly. It was really too clean. There was not even a speck left. These dozens of marks together were more than 100 meters wide. However, there were still some things left. A few meters away from this big pile of ashes, there were a few strands of dark red hair lying on the ground. The immortal ritual elder's jade-like hands were covered with a thin layer of light. She picked up the dark red hair and looked at it. Her expression changed slightly, and then she threw it away with slight disgust. She clapped her hands and said, "This is the hair of the Bloodwolf clan. Oh, the gatekeepers. That means this pile of ashes. They were all wiped out." Yin Nuoxing suddenly thought of the 2 gatekeepers who claimed to be from the Bloodwolf clan that he saw before he came in. Boom! Puff! In the distance, a huge green fire tornado suddenly swept across the land. The violent energy impact blew a few huge spatial cracks in the space, and the whole world rumbled. The dull sound made Yin Nuoxing and the others change their expressions. They turned their heads and saw the green fire filling the sky. No, this flame was no longer green. It was a green flame, and the color was gradually deepening. The energy was also becoming more and more terrifying, and it was enough to burn the entire sky. Vaguely, they could hear the roar of a dragon. Yin Nuoxing did not react to it, but Little White's expression changed instantly. Some moon blue energy gathered on his body, and he seemed to be ready to fight at any time. Green Dragon is injured. Yin Nuoxing was stunned, but she quickly understood what had happened. A monstrous energy surged and scattered the green flames in the sky. The green sea of fire turned into a rain of fire and fell to the ground, causing a series of violent energy explosions. Phew! God-level energy fluctuations. Yin Nuashing narrowed her eyes. She waved her hand, and the netherworld ruins sword appeared. She said in a deep voice, "It seems that this trip is not going to be so peaceful." Chapter 1046. The green sea of fire appeared like a prairie fire, and a huge fire tornado shot straight to the sky. In the sky, the dissipated sea of fire turned into sparks of fire and fell to the ground. However, each of the sparks was at least 300 meters in size. They were like small meteorites, and when they hit the ground, they released an extremely tyrannical energy impact. The green fire tornado spun crazily as the violent energy impact spread to every corner of the world. The violent fluctuations caused the space to vibrate and reflect an even more violent energy impact. In the middle of the dense fire tornado, there was a slender and beautiful figure standing in the air. Her long black hair danced behind her, and a green dragon tail that was more than a meter long swayed behind her. A green dress wrapped around her perfect and tall figure. However, the strong wind blew the dress close to her body, drawing out her beautiful and sexy curves. Waves of deep dragon roars were emitted from her throat. Her exquisite and devastatingly beautiful face did not have the slightest blemish. Her skin was lustrous white, although she was frowning slightly, and there was a powerful fighting spirit circulating around her body. There was no ferocious feeling. Her elegant and calm temperament seemed to have been carved into her bones, and it had not been completely washed away even at this moment. The vertical slits in her green eyes contracted slightly as the four figures in front of her were reflected in her eyes. A bright light flashed across her eyes. Even though she was in a disadvantageous situation, she did not show the slightest bit of panic. From the first time they met, they could tell that this girl was rather smart. Compared to charging and breaking through enemy lines on the battlefield, it seemed that a scroll was more suitable for her to stay behind others. After all, her temperament lacked the sharpness of killing. Even though the surrounding environment was so dangerous, she was still calm and indifferent, as if she would never panic. Clang! Yin Nuashing fiercely hit the head of the white tiger that was probably still asleep. What kind of strange description is that? Little White sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. She glared at him and suddenly jumped up. "That's what you said back then." Yin Nuashing was stunned. She scratched her head and pushed him back. "I haven't recovered too much of Feng Yuying's memories yet. Let's pretend that I don't know for now." Little White looked at him with disdain. He was simply deceiving himself and others. He would come back sooner or later. What was the difference between now and the future? Ignoring his gaze, Yin Nuashing looked at the girl who was wrapped in the strong wind. In a trance, a figure floated into his mind. It was a little unfamiliar, but also a little familiar. The beautiful green figure seemed to be just like what Xiaobai said. She always stood behind him to his right, less than half a meter away. She was obedient and dignified, and her presence was not particularly strong. She looked just like a female housekeeper. Speaking of which, did he say this himself? Or was it Little White? All right, even he himself was a little confused. Feng Yueying's memories were fragmented and couldn't be pieced together. To him, Little Qing was a familiar name, but an unfamiliar acquaintance. He already couldn't remember why he was looking for the Azure Dragon in the beginning. Maybe it was because of Feng Air. After that, he met Little White and obtained some of Feng Yueying's memories from the pendant. Maybe that was the real beginning. Moreover, he said that he was looking for it, but he was actually running around the entire world to do other things. Appearing in front of the green fire tornadoes were 4 humanoid life forms. From the aura that they released, they should also be humanoid. They held 4 weapons with extremely strong energy reactions in their hands. Even the robes on their bodies were emitting strong energy waves. There was the power of gods circulating within them. It was obvious that they were genuine first-grade weapons. That powerful energy made Little Qing and Little White extremely solemn. They had just recovered not long ago, so their abilities had not recovered much. Even their forms were not considered mature yet. Now that someone had come knocking on their door, if they didn't have good intentions, then they would really be in danger. 4 gods, close to the netherworld king realm. Little White gritted his teeth, his face full of resentment. If it wasn't for Yin Nuoshing stopping him at this moment, he would have already rushed up to bite the 4 fellows who took advantage of the situation. 4 gods park weapons that are completely unleashed. Do you think you can deal with them? Hearing that, Whitey turned around and stared at him with sharp eyes. Yin Nuoshing shook his head and smiled faintly. At least wait until they finish talking. I'm very curious. Who was able to find Little Qing and the others before us? Ah, this is a very interesting matter. Such a major event couldn't have been done by 4 heavenly gods on their own, and they even brought god park weapons with them. Perhaps it was an order from one of the old geezers. Well, let's just listen for now. We'll be in the dark and have the upper hand. Little White hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He suppressed the anger in his heart and remained silent for a while. Yin Nuoshing tilted his head and looked at Lon, Exa, and the others. He said softly, later, don't go out. Don't go out. Just stay in the magic circle. This magic circle is still a place where the laws are distorted. You won't be discovered by anyone, and you won't be harmed by any energy. Lon Exen wanted to say something, but when she saw his extremely serious expression, she hesitated for a moment, then nodded obediently. If it was a battle between god park weapons, they would only be a burden to him if they went up. Azure Dragon of the 4 gods of celestial phenomenon, you have a deep friendship with that tough turtle shell, but unfortunately, the young man who was holding a 1-foot-wide black ancient book smiled faintly. It is said that since the beginning of the world, the 4 gods have never met. What I heard today has overturned those meaningless words of the past. Originally, we just wanted to talk to you about something. Well, it's good. If we can capture another 4 gods, Master will be very happy. Now, he can't wait for another 4 gods to appear here. Every bit of your flesh and blood is priceless. With 2 4 gods, Master will definitely be able to improve further. Those crimson eyes made Xiao Qing and Xiao by days for a moment. They didn't remember it, but it was very familiar. They seemed to have seen it before. Was it a memory from their bloodline? Azure Dragon, I'll give you a chance. Submit to my master's might, and you'll still have a good home to return to and live on. Otherwise, we'll definitely peel off your scales and take your blood. The young man with the halberd sneered. Those overbearing words did not anger Little Qing. She only smiled warmly, as if nothing had happened. However, the words that came out of her mouth were completely devoid of warmth. Your teacher? You're just a half-baked god. You're still struggling at death's door. You sealed your origin and sealed it under the earth. You're suppressed by the will of the world, and you're like a dead dog crawling on the ground. You want to control the 4 gods of celestial phenomenon? The moment you sign the contract. Huh. Her last sentence was said very softly, so it wasn't heard. She smiled disdainfully, then continued. No matter what happened in the past in this world, there's only one person I acknowledge, and I am willing to accompany. You can try to catch us and bring us back. Let's see if you can walk out of this godfall sky. Buzz. Suddenly, there was a burst of light. The young man wearing silver armor and holding a large saber slashed out with his saber. The piercingly cold saber light illuminated the whole world. As soon as it appeared, the earth, which was covered in flames, suddenly became silent. The young man holding the ancient book also flipped it in his hand. Wisps of God's majesty flowed out from the book, adding to the saber light, making it even more terrifying. With a slash of the saber, the space cracked and the time barrier collapsed. The majesty of the God's majesty almost suffocated Lon, Exen and the others. Roar! Little Qing gritted her teeth as the cyan flames coiled around her right hand. She didn't take on any form. She merely grabbed the flames with one hand as though she was grabbing a halberd. A dragon's roar filled with rage rang out from her throat. They, the 4 celestial goddesses of celestial phenomenon, would actually be treated as something else and be listed as a hunting target? She should have been furious, yet her heart was extremely calm, as though she wasn't surprised at all. The shocking saber light came crashing down on her in 2 or 3 breaths of time. The terrifying aura locked onto her, and it was useless to escape. Before the saber light even touched her body, she felt that her body was on the verge of cracking. The dragon scales hidden under her skin were showing signs of cracking. Just as she was about to forcefully resist the blade light, a golden light suddenly flashed in front of her. She only felt that she was in an absolutely calm domain. The shocking energy, the monstrous power, all dissipated and the world quieted down. In her line of sight, a colorful back suddenly appeared, causing her to be slightly stunned. "All right, let's stop here." Yin Nuoxing's figure flickered and appeared in front of Shaoqing. He held a fist-sized black bead in his hand. The energy vacuum domain bloomed from his body, rushed into the black bead, and then released into the space. A wave of energy was suddenly released, and when it came into contact with the shocking saber light, it actually caused the saber light to tremble and disappear. Even the entire area became much quieter. "You're courting death." The young man holding the halberd was slightly stunned. In the next instant, his figure violently shot out. In a flash, he appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing. The 3-meter long golden halberd in his hand bloomed with a terrifying energy that could change the color of heaven and earth. It carried the feeling of eternity, and it was like a shocking bolt of lightning exploding out. Yin Nuoxing's eyes contained the light element. No matter how fast the halberd was, it was just moving in slow motion in his eyes. He lifted the black bead in his hand, and it gently left his hand and floated forward. He softly chanted, "Darkness origin bead, devour." Ding! The spearhead, which was half the size of an ordinary person, violently collided with the darkness origin bead that Yin Nuoxing was holding in the air. Under the frightening strength bestowed by that shocking might, it actually only caused the bead to emit an extremely clear sound. It was like the sound of fingernails gently touching glass. This was not a power that anyone could resist. As long as a strand of God's Park weapons power was released, it was not something that non-gods could resist. Everyone could only submit to this supreme power. However, Yin Nuo planet was not affected at all. Not only did he have dozens of God's Park weapons protecting him, but he also had divine authority weapons and even divine swords like the Netherworld Divine Sword. The black bead stood in front of him like a heavenly wall, releasing dark energy into the space. It was so dark that it was resplendent, so dark that it was deep, blocking that terrifying power. "You're getting in the way." Yin Nuoxing coldly glanced at the person. He pushed forward with the darkness origin bead in his hand, and the web-like black energy suddenly condensed into a shockwave. With a rumble, it sent the halberd-wielding person flying. He vomited blood, but he was protected by the God's Park weapon as well, so he did not immediately collapse. Rumble! The other 3 were surprised as well. They raised their weapons to protect themselves, but they were also blown several thousand meters away by the shockwave. The surrounding mountains and azure flames were all reduced to dust, and the ground rumbled as it shattered. Little Qing stared blankly at the person who had appeared before her, but that blankness only lasted for a moment. She saw the purplish-red pendant floating in Yin Nuoxing's collar. That pendant was extremely familiar, and she immediately widened her eyes at Mei Mao. She cried out involuntarily, If you have something to say it later. Anyway, take little Xian to that place first. Lil Bai is there." Yin Nuoxing blinked and pointed in a certain direction with a faint smile. "You're back." Little Qing's eyes changed slightly, becoming extremely gentle. She unconsciously intertwined her hands in front of her and smiled warmly. Yin Nuoxing smiled back, but now was not the time to talk. He waved his hand and tossed the darkness origin bead to little Qing, then drew the underworld ruins sword from his body. Several divine swords had already fused together, and the power they released surpassed the darkness origin bead. God's Park Evolution, Eternal Awakening. The young man with the ancient book in his hand shouted loudly. The entire black ancient book lit up with a bright light, as if it was about to burn. A great and terrifying fluctuation rumbled through the world, as if a god had awakened. In the rising, dazzling flame, Yin Nuoxing could even see an old figure faintly discernible. A pair of intimidating eyes contained an endless amount of pressure. Ordinary people would be afraid of you. But to me, you're just a mirror. If your real body appeared before me, it would be more difficult for me to deal with you. Unfortunately, Yin Nuoxing shook his head. The figure in the ancient book became more and more solid. The ancient book actually had a consciousness, and it was specially made. It seemed to have awakened all of a sudden, and the vast power of a god caused heaven and earth to tremble. A terrifying pressure spread for 90,000 miles, and heaven and earth wailed. The blurry figure disappeared as soon as it appeared, and the ancient book also released several times more energy in an instant. Its power was monstrous. They were forcibly extracting all the energy in heaven and earth. Relying on their own power, they could not support the awakening of a colossus like a God's Park weapon. The energy it contained was shocking. "Who are you?" The young man holding the ancient book glared at Yin Nuoxing with his long hair fluttering in the wind. His hands trembled slightly. Even if this was something his master had given him, he could not use its full power. If it were not for the existence of a special charm in the ancient book that prevented it from extracting his energy, he would have been sucked dry a long time ago. Why are you talking so much nonsense with him? He's just a mere demigod. What is he? Let's capture him and take away his God's Park weapon. The young man holding the halberd shouted angrily. He was covered in blood, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was in a very sorry state after being hit by the dark origin bead. Even if his life was protected by the God's Park weapon, he was close to death. That level of energy could cause serious injuries just by brushing against it. What am I? Yin Nuoxing lowered his eyes and sneered. He held the divine sword in his right hand and spread his arms slightly. I'm nothing. You're nothing. The people behind you are nothing. This world is nothing. This time is nothing. 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 The violent power of the stars broke free and broke through to an unimaginable level. The terrifying aura was even more frightening than the awakening of the God's Park weapon. It was like a giant beast that had been sleeping since ancient times. When it opened its eyes, all the realms in the universe would tremble. Yin Nuoxing sneered and suddenly turned around. The divine sword drew a perfect arc in the air and slashed at the space behind him. Clang! With a startling tremor, tens of thousands of dark yellow openings opened in the world. Purple light illuminated the world. It was extremely dazzling and beautiful. The person who suddenly appeared behind him was holding a palm-sized black token in his hand. He slammed it straight into the sword of Netherworld. The sword seemed to split the heavens and earth apart, splitting the chaos that had just been created. The sword swept across thousands of miles, and even cracks appeared on the barrier of the primordial realm. The barriers of space and time were blasted into ashes. Puffed. That person coughed up blood. The black token lit up at the critical moment and protected his body. He flew back tens of thousands of feet, almost flying out of the god realm. Under the illumination of the cold light of that sword, one could see the scene of the myriad realms collapsing. The berserk aura that was released was like the blood of gods, the destruction of galaxies, and the dimming of gods. It had cut down countless experts and drank their blood. That grand vision was so terrifying that it made one suffocate. That divine force was not something a mere heavenly deity or deity could resist. Even if they had a God Park weapon, it was still impossible. Yin Nuoxing saw that he was not dead. She was stunned. She saw the black token in his hand and narrowed her eyes. She said with a surprised tone, "The token of 3 lives? No, that's not right. It doesn't have the endless aura of life like the token of 3 lives. That's the token of 3 lives. Heh, and it's a replica. It can cause a lot of damage to gods if it's used in an ambush. It could be considered exquisite for such a low-quality item to be able to withstand the sword. Yin Nuashing chuckled. She thought that she was lucky enough to see the legendary item today. She seemed to be praising it, but in the next second, her colorful eyes suddenly turned cold. Die! Buzz! With a sweep of the sword light that covered thousands of miles was like an endless abyss. The aura of death was irresistible, and the medallion was directly shattered into pieces. That person was also annihilated by the boundless sword light. Kill! The halberd-wielding young man's eyes were bloodshot, and with a roar of rage, he charged forward. His blood and chi surged, and he poured all of his essence, energy, and spirit into this attack. Running away was definitely not a realistic option, so he poured everything he had into this attack. Even his God's Park weapon was about to burst into flames. The other three also roared and charged forward with weapons in hand. You want to stake everything on this one attack? Yin Nuashing murmured coldly. Suddenly, he grinned. I'll let you see the truth of this world before you die, he murmured softly. The 6 wings on his back slowly spread open, and the 5 divine halos gradually appeared. They were extremely dim, but under the light of the star field, they were extremely dazzling. The 5 black divine halos fell into the eyes of the 3 people, and they felt a chill. 5 divine halos, that was the symbol of a god. Kill! The 3 people's eyes were already blood-red. After seeing the sword light, they knew that they were no match for it. Now that they saw the 5 extremely dim black divine halos, anger rushed to their heads. They didn't hesitate to burn everything they had and put everything they had into this attack. They knew that Yin Nuashing was definitely not a god. Otherwise, his divine halos wouldn't be so dim. If they fought with their lives on the line, they might be able to find a way out. Of course, he didn't use the 5 divine halos to show off. He wasn't interested in that. He just released his power to the limit. Then, he grabbed the divine sword formed by the fusion of the Netherworld ruins swords with both hands. He held the scabbard in one hand and the hilt in the other. He made a gentle pulling motion, and the moment he did that, the power in his body disappeared faster than the ebbing tide. Walala! The sound of energy surging was like water splashing, and a monstrous aura suddenly disappeared to the point where it was almost imperceptible. His colorful long hair also turned almost completely white in 2 breaths of time. Yin Nuashing calmed himself down and gently pulled open the sword sheath with both hands. Sky splitting. Chapter 10:47. The brilliant light seemed to tear the entire world apart. That eternal light was too dazzling, making it impossible for people to look directly at it. Little White and the others, who were hiding in the dark, quickly closed their eyes after a glance. The sky and the earth shook, and the world seemed to have turned upside down. The tremors did not stop, and space and time were wailing. They also saw that a huge hole had been cut open in the magnificent purple crystal barrier. The hole led to the void, but it led to the void of another place. In an instant, this place became countless times brighter than it was during the day. Even the stars in the sky were hidden by this light, disappearing from the sky. Even hundreds of thousands of miles away, one could see this dazzling light. It was as if 1,000 giant suns had exploded in the sky. However, this was only a flash of light. The terrifying energy fluctuations spread out at almost infinite speed, spreading throughout the entire extreme plane region. In the extreme plane region, near the edge of the extreme plane region, there were many creatures that felt this world-destroying energy fluctuation. They all turned their gazes in horror. At this moment, who knew how many people turned pale with fright? They all looked towards the far west of the extreme plane region. That powerful and unparalleled aura startled all the creatures. The old monsters, who had just calmed down, were shaken awake again. Their eyes flashed with a terrifying light as they looked towards the horizon in silence. They felt as if a god spirit was awakening, using all of its power. That power made their hearts throb. That was the aura of a complete god spirit. Was someone at the same level awakening and using all of its power. The aura of a god spirit. A group of experts flew out of the Nightwalker Alliance outside of Godfall Sky, as well as other camps nearby. They stood in the sky, wanting to see what was going on inside. However, the powerful ripples suddenly swept over them, causing them to tremble and fall from the sky. They half knelt on the ground, unable to move. Some people even opened their heavenly eyes to see what was going on inside. In the end, they were almost blinded by the godly might. Blood flowed from their eyes, and they could not help but scream. In the Godfall Sky, special detection methods such as souls couldn't detect what was happening inside. Even if there were countless eyes looking at this place, it was difficult to see what was happening inside. Even the gods couldn't do anything about it. No one could see what was happening inside. Even the experts at the edge of the Godfall Sky could only see the dazzling light as if they were staring at the sun at a close distance. They couldn't look directly at it. They could only vaguely see that the mountains inside, which were more than 10 zhang tall, had all been evaporated. That space seemed to no longer exist, and many things on the ground had been flattened. If it weren't for the energy barrier protecting the camp and the town, and the fact that most of the energy was directed towards the sky, hundreds of thousands of li in radius would have been destroyed in an instant. Not even dregs will be left behind. Rumble. The dull sound was still reverberating in their ears. It was the sound of energy rolling and exploding. The ground gradually calmed down, and the dazzling light dimmed a little. However, at the edge of the Godfall Sky, they should have been able to see the starry sky directly. Now, because of the light, it was as if it was daytime. The sky was white, and it didn't dim so quickly. Little White, who was hiding in the dark, rushed forward to block the wind the moment the energy exploded. At that moment, his cheeks were blown out of shape by the wind, and his long hair was sticking straight behind his back. He looked like a white hedgehog. When little Qing saw this, she couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Holy sh**t. Why did this guy use so much energy? He's really not afraid of drying up this place. Hearing the laughter, Little White slowly came back to his senses. He rubbed his stiff face and muttered, "My hair is messed up because of the wind. Lon Xin, guess part of the reason. Maybe it's because of the Godhead weapons. Brother Nuashing doesn't need to use so much energy to deal with 4 gods. But if it's to deal with 4 Godhead weapons, it's necessary to use so much energy. Does that mean he destroyed them directly?" Little White looked like he had a toothache. 4 Godhead weapons, and he destroyed them just like that. Didn't he feel any heartache? He almost wiped out the ultimate plain region. Xiao Xian calmly stroked her snow-white hair. She still had a lingering fear. Of course, she knew what had happened to Yin Nuashing. However, that was only known by her demon incarnation. Now that her real body had come to see, her eyes were almost blinded. At that moment, the scene she saw was black and white. The world had faded under the strong light. If not for Yin Nuashing pouring most of her energy into the 3 people and then turning it to the sky, there might have been a big hole at the edge of the region. She might have even dug out a piece of it. She looked back and saw that Elder Xian, he was still in a daze and hadn't reacted yet. She couldn't help but stick out her little tongue. It seemed that she had a lot of things to explain later. That was why she didn't want to bring anyone here. It was too troublesome to explain. The turbulent energy gradually calmed down, and the sky slowly became dark. However, this place didn't become dark at all. It was just that the sky returned from its extremely bright state to the scene of a starry night sky. Yin Nuashing slowly landed on the ground. Only the roots of her snow-white hair were left with some color. This time, she had also used up all her energy. Her life force was almost depleted. To ordinary people, they wouldn't dare to play like this. After all, if their life force was depleted, they would die if they weren't careful. However, to him, it had become a common occurrence. No matter if it was now or in the ancient era, it was still the same. Indeed, it was a problem that couldn't be changed. The divine sword in his hand had already returned to his body. He lowered his head and looked at his palms. He clenched them tightly. For some reason, Some confidence rose in his heart. This was the first time he had used such a large amount of energy. He didn't expect that the godly body of the reception spirit could activate the weapons to such an extent. If only I had the godly body of the reception spirit back then. Perhaps I could have killed them directly. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. At that time, he was holding 4 great divine weapons. However, he still fought with a group of gods above the divine realm. Both sides suffered great losses, and he almost died. He had a lot of resentment. If it was him now, he should be able to. There were many conditions and restrictions when using the power of divine weapons. If they were used carelessly, they would be damaged. For example, the Netherworld Sword, Ling Hong's sword, and Red Star Sword were all damaged by him back then. It was also like the Sand Time Sword that was damaged a few years ago. Divine weapons were indeed powerful. However, if one didn't use the correct method to use them, it would be very easy for them to be damaged. Recklessly activating the power would only cause the power to go on a rampage in the divine sword and destroy oneself. What a powerful yet fragile thing. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. After all, it was very easy for him to kill himself. Just like now, even if his body was very strong, he couldn't stop his muscles from destroying his ligaments. This was why even deities would get cramps. Among the many powers of the reception spirit godly body, the power to control weapons was the most terrifying. If he had also practiced the reception spirit godly body back then, he might have been killed by others before reaching the divine realm. Things are really unpredictable. However, to be honest, if he had already practiced the reception spirit godly body at that time, with the 4 great divine weapons in his hands and the many divine power weapons in his hands, it wouldn't have been a problem for him to kill hundreds of experts above the divine realm. No matter what, with this physique, it was not impossible for him to exert 100% of the power of weapons. It was even possible for him to exceed the limit of power by 4 times. Back then, he couldn't even exert 80% of the power of Netherworld Sword and the others. After letting his imagination run wild for a while, Little White ran over with the others. Lan Xin was the first to jump in front of him. She circled around him, pinched his arm, and looked at it. When she found that it was fine, she heaved a sigh of relief. Really, you're just as reckless as before. A gentle and elegant voice rang out, causing Yin Nuoxing to turn his head slightly. He saw the lady in the green dress walking over gracefully. Her hands were hanging in front of her body, and they were crossed naturally. She looked at him with a gentle smile and repeated, "You're back." Yin Nuoxing scratched his head. "You can say that. I'm back. It's just that it's not complete." Little Qing tilted her head and looked at Little White. He shrugged helplessly and told her many things that happened to Yin Nuoxing in his soul. He emphasized the matter of Feng Yueing. As the two of them were talking, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but look at Little Qing. His palm unconsciously stroked his long hair. How should he put it? Although he said that he saw her, he didn't feel much emotion in his heart. There were too few memories of Feng Yueing's previous life left behind. Most of them were left behind as Dao fruits. If he wanted to recover his memories, he might have to wait until then. Speaking of which, Little Qing is really tall. Yin Nuoxing muttered in a low voice, "She's half a head taller than me. She's the same as Bing Er." Lan Xin glanced and pressed her hand on Yin Nuoxing's head. Then, she smiled. "Maybe the members of the dragon race are all very tall." Yin Nuoxing spread his hands and took out the pendant. He glanced at it, then looked at Little Qing, who had a warm smile on her face. He suddenly remembered that this pendant sealed a small portion of Feng Yueing's memory. That memory could eliminate the hostility in the hearts of Little White and the rest. The premise was that they had it. Now, it seemed that Little Qing didn't need it. This was a good thing. He glanced again and saw Little Qing's long tail. With a rough look, it was wrapped around her right leg like a tattoo. He looked at her back and didn't seem to see any wings. He couldn't help but say, "So, Little Qing isn't a big lizard." Lan Xin glanced and nodded. "It seems to be a long snake." "Little girl, isn't it inappropriate for us to say that?" Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly. Lan Xin rolled her eyes at him. Brother Nuashing was the one who brought it up first. I'm just following along with what you said. On the other side, Little Ching and Little White seemed to have finished their conversation. Little Ching walked in front of Yin Nuashing and lowered her head slightly to look at him. She stretched out her hand and rubbed his snow-white hair. Her gentle smile never disappeared. No matter what, you're still you. Your style of doing things is very similar. Yin Nuashing stuck out his tongue. I've heard many things from Little White. You. Little Ching pursed her lips and muttered to herself for a while. Then she said, "Do you still need our strength in this life? However, we have yet to return to our mature forms. I don't know if we can become your strength. You can decide on these matters." Yin Nuashing scratched his head. "I'm just here to complete the task that I entrusted him with. He asked me to say thank you before I could say anything. If possible, I'd like to tell you a little about what happened in the past to dispel the hostility in your hearts. As for what happens in the future, you are free in this life. You can do whatever you want. There will always be a place for you by my side. If you're tired from playing, you can come to my place to rest. It's not a big deal even if you don't do that soul contract." Yin Nuashing closed one of his eyes and spread out his hands, smiling faintly. Little Ching also laughed softly. She stretched out her hand and pressed it between his eyebrows. At the same time, she also touched the black star pearl. Her other hand held the back of his head and pulled him into her embrace. She spoke softly. The faint sound of a dragon's roar quietly circulated in this place. "It's actually quite dangerous to be by my side in this life." Yin Nuashing muttered. Originally, he had planned to travel alone. He didn't expect that there would be so many people by his side unknowingly. Then in this life, don't abandon us so casually. Little Ching smiled faintly. The faint sound of a dragon's roar resounded in Yin Nuashing's soul. In his soul, beside Little White and Feng, Er's imprints, another green imprint silently appeared. If one looked carefully, one could even see an azure dragon slithering within the imprint. Zi raised his head and looked at the few imprints. He was a little speechless. After a long while, he sighed softly. "Congratulations, congratulations. The 4 celestial phenomenon gods are finally complete. Oh, there's still one left." His soul was filled with a warm feeling. Some dusty memories were inadvertently awakened. He seemed to have seen Feng Yuing. There were also people by his side. Those seemed to be precious memories that had been hidden away. The people by his side were all people he treasured. Therefore, when that day came, he didn't want them to know about him. After this, there was no possibility of turning back. Rather than making them wait endlessly for him, who didn't know whether he would return or not, why not let them know nothing and just hate him like this? That would be enough. Although things don't go as planned, it's still a pretty good result. Yin Nuashing sighed softly. He took a deep breath and said unhappily, "Since you knew this would happen, why did you choose to meet me from the start?" The warm light enveloped the memories. He looked at these memories and tilted his head to look at the figure that appeared beside him. He couldn't help but roll his eyes. Feng Yuing. This guy was really persistent. In this state, it was natural for him to appear and take a look. Well, everyone will be attracted by beautiful things. Of course, with no exception. You should know this better than I do. Feng Yuing grinned. He could only be awakened by the familiar energy at times like these. He would always be hidden in the deepest part of the memories, and no one would know. Yin Nuashing looked at him with narrowed eyes. Feng Yuing looked at him and grinned foolishly. After a moment, the former sighed and shook his head. Of course, he knew. It was because he knew that he felt that he was a little silly. He knew that they would be separated one day, but he still yearned for those beautiful things. He hated it the most. What once had? These words were meaningless. If he couldn't stay until the end, everything would be meaningless. Memories were ultimately just cold memories. No matter how beautiful the words were or how much self-definition was added, it was useless. Well, we're ultimately the same. The only difference is that you're more complete. I seem to be more like a part of your consciousness hidden in your heart. Feng Yuing smiled faintly. Anyway, the result is not bad. That should be enough. Little Ching doesn't hate me. This is also expected. After all, Her temper is a little too good. Little Bai is different. That child is too impulsive. Yin Nuoxing let out a long breath. Looking at these warm memories, she said faintly, and then? There's no and then. You continue on your path, and I'll continue to hide. I didn't leave behind these soul fragments just to come out and say a few words. It was originally a protective measure, but it doesn't seem to be of use. Feng Yuing scratched his head and grinned. Then I'll go back first. The next time I come out, it might be the last time we see each other. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand and watched him disappear into the depths of her soul. Her expression was indifferent. After a long time, she finally regained her senses. Looking at the beautiful memories hidden in the depths of her sea of memories, she sighed softly, turned around, and disappeared. Slowly coming back to her senses, Yin Nuoxing looked at this girl who had the aura of a big sister. That gentle gaze seemed a little more familiar at this moment, with a hint of undetectable doting. This made him feel a little awkward. He was a little unaccustomed to this gaze. It was a little like how Sister Lu Li and Divine King would looked at him, with a hint of doting, as if she was looking at her own junior or something. Azure Dragon, where's that fellow who's 4 beats slower? Isn't he with you? Little Bai wandered around the surroundings. In the end, he couldn't find that tortoise. Puzzled, he ran back. His senses were definitely not wrong. Previously, he had sensed that Azure Dragon's aura was together with Black Tortoise. How could he not be here? Little Xian, he's here. Little Qing blinked at Mei Mao. With a wave of her hand, she took out a huge pale white egg that was about 3 meters tall. Everyone was stunned when they saw it. Why is it an egg again? Yin Nuoxing covered his face. Had he been with eggs all his life? He didn't even know how many eggs he had seen. Little Bai opened his mouth in astonishment. He's 4 beats slower and still hasn't recovered? Oh, he's the same as me. He recovered more than 10 years ago, but he was a year later than me. However, 3 years ago, he felt that there were some problems that weren't handled properly, so he went back. Little Qing said softly. Went back. The group of people widened their eyes. There was such a thing? Originally, it wasn't necessary. After all, only Feng Feng has the ability to transform into an egg. After we came out, we couldn't transform into an egg anymore. Little Xian didn't throw away his shell, so I helped him seal it. Little Qing Tian said with a smile. Everyone, speaking of which, Feng Feng is in your soul. Little Qing rubbed Yin Nuoxing's head. At the moment when the soul contract was formed, she read a lot from Yin Nuoxing's memory of this life. When she learned that he had found Feng Feng, she was a little surprised. As for the memory of the ancient era, he had always sealed it himself. No one else could touch it. And in this way, Lan Xian counted with her jade fingers. In this life, Feng Er is the oldest, then Little Qing, Little Xian, and Little Bai, you are the youngest in this life. Little Bai's face twitched violently. He wanted to refute, but when he thought that even if it was 3 years ago, he was also the youngest, he had nothing else to say. He pulled his long hair in distress. After a while, he jumped up unwillingly and defended himself. This doesn't count. It has to be calculated according to 3 eras. Feng Feng is the youngest. Little Bai, you are the youngest. Do you know that? Yin Nuoxing slapped him down. According to this life's calculation. No, but seeing that Little Bai was about to explode, Little Qing looked at him gently and pressed her jade hand on his head. She said with a smile, you are being naughty again. Then, the white hedgehog, who was still exploding, suddenly shrunk into a ball and broke out in cold sweat. When Yin Nuoxing saw this, he couldn't help but pick up the scar. A few years ago, I don't know who was suppressed by Feng Er to the point that he couldn't move. Little Bai was speechless. He couldn't say anything. He shrank in the corner and drew circles with a bitter face. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 1048. All the memories in this world will become relics that are not worth mentioning in the fated reality. No matter how beautiful they are, no matter how great their influence is, they will eventually fade away with time. In an ancient cave, A colorful altar was set up with bones. There were ancient patterns and patterns on it, and it was a memorial to the past. There was nothing special on the altar. It was just a memory, an inheritance that was enough to shock the demon realm. It was an inheritance of the demon god that was enough to allow ordinary small clans to stand strong in the divine world. It was an inheritance of the demon god that would not decline even after an era. Yin Nuashing clapped his hands lightly, put his palms together, and chanted silently. He sighed heavily. When the people beside him saw his action, they quickly did the same. When they heard his soft murmurs, their emotions were in turmoil. Things that have passed away will eventually pass away. I hate it when something is only left in my memory. I hate it because I know it. Yin Nuashing lowered his eyelids slightly and sighed again. Lan Xen, and the others did not know what he was sighing about. They could not see through his thoughts. They only felt that his emotions were very complicated. He learned a few things from the golden bead that contained the inheritance. This was an inheritance used by the Yao clan, and there was a 90% chance that it belonged to the Yao clan's last divine god who had ascended to godhood in the 110th era. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and tossed the golden ball to the immortal ritual elder. He wrinkled his nose and said, I know you were looking for this. I'll give it to you now. However, this cannot be used by Xiao Xian. Yin Nuashing pulled Xiao Xian to his side and poked her face. He said, You don't need to use this. It's not necessary. Moreover, it's not safe. Not safe. The immortal ritual elder took the golden ball. She was excited for a moment, but when she heard what he said, she was stunned again. According to the original plan, if they really got this thing, they would indeed give it to the most powerful young person in the Dark Cloud Immortal clan, which was Xiao Xian. However, when she heard what he said, there seemed to be some hidden story. After witnessing the battle earlier, Elder Xianyi was unable to remain calm, especially when she heard Xiao Xian mumbling about some obscure things. Clearly, this young man was not the person she knew on the surface. Furthermore, it was her goddess who told her. She could not possibly not trust her own clansmen. Thus, when she heard Xiao Xian's words, her willowy brows furrowed. Moreover, he felt somewhat regretful. He had spent a great deal of effort and wandered around the ultimate plane region to finally find this thing, but it was actually said that he couldn't use it. It sounded quite depressing. An inheritance left behind by a god or something. It sounds quite tempting. Yin Nuashing sneered. She shook her head and sighed. A god wouldn't do anything meaningless. The inheritance he left behind naturally has its own reasons. A god wouldn't do anything meaningless. As for what the meaning is, I don't know. Who knows what that damn spiritual god was thinking? He didn't leave behind any words, only a memory of the past. No matter how I look at it, I find it suspicious. The so-called gods are the kind of people who are extremely stubborn and willful. They have already come into contact with reincarnation, so they can arrange their own affairs and face reincarnation fearlessly, waiting for the day of their return. Even if there is some hidden story that leads to a will or something like that, they should clearly state it. At least, that's what I've come into contact with. Someone who doesn't say anything and doesn't mention anything. I really don't feel at ease. Yin Nuashing shook her head. First of all, she was very suspicious. People like the gods were too purposeful. They would sacrifice a lot of things for it, even if it was related to themselves. She had stepped into that realm, so she naturally knew the temperament of the so-called gods. It was undeniable that there were many people with eccentric personalities. However, when it came to inheritances, they were all very stubborn. Abruptly leaving behind something and not mentioning anything, this probability was simply ridiculous. That old bastard in the Star Palace was currently in a deep slumber. When someone came to find him for something, he would quickly explain everything. That old bastard was a master above the gods. At their level, they would either leave something behind with a strong purpose and assign the inheritor to do something according to fate or by force. Otherwise, they would simply leave nothing behind and wait for reincarnation to complete everything themselves. Yin Nuashing only felt that it was suspicious to leave something behind without knowing what it was. Either there was some scheme that involved the inheritor, or it wasn't anything good. Basically, they wouldn't tell the inheritor about either of these situations. Xiao Xian didn't need that damn inheritance to reach the post-god level. I don't need that thing. Yin Nuoxing pulled Xiao Xian into his arms and stroked her snow-white hair. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the golden ball. Anyway, I've already told you some obscure things. I've also given you the thing. I won't allow Xiao Xian to touch this thing. If you really want to use it, find another one in the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan. By the way, I've already reminded you. If anything happens in the future, don't come to me. I won't take responsibility. When Elder Shinny saw that Xiao Xian was so happy that she was rubbing against his chest because of his biased words, her cheeks couldn't help but twitch wildly. She really wanted to say, "When did my family's goddess become yours?" Why do you have to make arrangements for her? However, she didn't dare to say it out loud because she had just witnessed that guy's terrifying battle and the four celestial phenomenon gods beside him. This kind of person who possessed great power, but was only at the demigod level, was too frightening. Perhaps he was the guy who said he was after reincarnation. This kind of person couldn't be provoked. After rubbing against Yun Nuoxing to her heart's content, Xiao Xian obediently extricated herself from Yun Nuoxing's arms. She didn't feel any regret about giving up on this seemingly very tempting inheritance. After all, he was once a heavenly god. She felt that his words made sense. She nodded and said, "Yes." Little Star said that she doesn't need it, so she doesn't need it. Elder Shinny couldn't help but cover her face and sigh. She put away the golden ball and said, "Since that's the case, we'll think about it carefully when we go back. If Divine Lady doesn't want to, no one in the clan will force her. Although some stubborn old people might complain. It's fine. When the time comes, I'll just take Xiao Xian away." Yun Nuoxing pinched the girl's face and said with a faint smile, "While we're at it, we'll beat up those who gossip." Elder Shinny's face was in a mess. Yun Nuoxing lowered his head and looked at Xiao Xian. He originally thought that she would stay by his side or something. He had already thought of many things in the future, but it seemed that this girl still couldn't leave. Only half of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan's inheritance has passed. There's still a little more to go. Little Star, don't worry. This is an inheritance that only our clan members can use. It's different from that thing of unknown origin. There won't be any problems. Xiao Xian stuck out her tongue and stretched out her snow-white hand to pinch his nose. Little Star, you still have your things to do. I can't leave the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan for the time being. I can't delay you. When the inheritance is over, I'll put down some things in the clan and travel with you. Yes, I'll try to find you before the demon world descends. Elder Shinny almost vomited blood when she heard this. This girl had already calculated the future. If this went on, wouldn't she have to give up her identity as the goddess? This was the position of the future manager of the Dark Cloud Immortal Clan. Anyway, her mind was already in a mess these few days. This time, she would probably bring a lot of problems back to the clan, not to mention other things. She looked at the two who were talking intimately and sighed. Just the goddess herself would probably bring back a lot of problems. For example, what she said just now? No, actually, I'm not that worried about you. Yin Nuoxing stared at this girl and shrugged. She could even survive the difficulties of the divine flame. What else in this world couldn't she survive? The matter in the Godfall sky could be considered to have come to an end. Overall, the process was quite exciting, and the ending was quite peaceful. The commotion caused by the battle must have spread to many places. At this time, it didn't seem right to rush out of the Godfall sky rashly. I used a lot of strength just now. The waves of a complete deity's level will still spread. Now, not to mention other places, at least a lot of old monsters in the Ultimate Plane region will be looking here. To avoid some unnecessary trouble, Yin Nuoxing muttered to herself for a while and looked around. Are you planning to stay here for a month or two? Little White joked. Stupid. Do you want to see whose patience is better by staying here for a month or two? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and knocked on Little White's head. Then she turned to look at the edge of the depths and said, "Let's go that way. We'll go around the Source Ice River and go around the edge of the realm of the gods. Then We'll go to the south of the ultimate plain region. The Godfall sky blocks the line of sight of all those who want to pass by here, so there won't be a problem if we go from the outside. Lon Sheener heard a new name and was a little curious. What's the Source Ice River? A river? Where does it come from? Yin Nuashing was stunned. She turned around and saw that everyone was looking at her curiously. She blinked and asked curiously, "You don't know?" Little Blue and Little White scratched their heads and laughed dryly. "We have some impression of this name, but we're not too sure." Yin Nuashing slapped her face, but then she thought that it was quite normal. "Oh, it's normal that you don't know. After all, no one would come to these places." The Source Ice River originates from the two extremes of the realm of the gods. It's a huge river that flows from the North Ice Realm and the South Ice Realm. It's the one that separates the four origin regions. Those who have been to the two ice realms should know about it, right? Yin Nuashing gestured with her hand. Everyone nodded. They knew about the two rivers and had seen them before. Outside the North Ice Realm, there was a 1,000-jong-wide river that separated the North Ice Realm from the Source Peak region and the Kuan origin region. The river in the South Ice Realm separated the other two origin regions. Yin Nuashing continued, "Do you know where the two rivers flow to?" Everyone was stunned and shook their heads. They had only looked at those places from afar and had never really studied them. They only knew about them. Lon Exine thought for a moment and suddenly realized. Could it be that the two rivers are the Source Ice River, and they go around the entire realm of the gods? That's right. I'll give you a thumbs up. Yin Nuashing grinned and rubbed her head hard. The Source Ice River is located at the edge of the four origin regions of the realm of the gods. The real edge is thousands of meters wide and is less than 100 meters away from the edge. When the North and South Ice realms are in turmoil, the waters of the Source Ice River will flood. At that time, the overflowing water will spread out for 100 meters and fall from the edge of the realm of the gods, forming a very beautiful and huge waterfall. The drop is almost equal to the height of the realm of the gods. In the end, the water will flow along the forbidden barrier that covers the entire realm of the gods and fall to the bottom of the barrier, disappearing into the starry sky. If the water falls along the cliff, it will flow back to the underground of the realm of the gods. Yin Nuashing explained as she twirled her fingers and led everyone to the edge of the realm of the gods. "I haven't seen that place yet." Lon Xian, and Mei Mao's eyes were sparkling. They were already imagining the scene there. The waterfall at the edge is also known as the Sky Falling Waterfall, and it rarely appears. After all, the Northern and Southern Ice Realms are the most famous and occupy the largest area. Relatively speaking, they are not as ferocious as the Forbidden Lands. It's just that the rules there are a bit unusual, and the living environment there is just too harsh. There are very few people in those places, and there are also very few movements. Naturally, there won't be any disturbances, and it's also very rare to see the Origin Glacier flood. It's rare to see the Source Ice River. Yin Nuashing shrugged. "I was lucky enough to see it once. At that time, I was busy entering the star regions and didn't use the teleportation gate. Instead, I flew out from the edge of the realm of the gods and saw that magnificent scene." While they were talking, Yin Nuashing and the others climbed over a mountain. From the edge of the short mountain, what appeared in their eyes was a clear river that reflected the entire starry sky. It was so calm that it was hard to imagine. There wasn't the slightest sound of flowing water. Many stars were reflected on the surface of the river, twinkling and sparkling. "This is the Source Ice River." Little Bai's eyes widened. How should he put it? Ordinary. Little Qing saw the astonishment in his eyes and said it for him. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. "It's just a river. What else do you think it is?" Huge waves that never stop rolling all year round, sweeping the river water into the starry sky, and then slamming it down so hard that it makes the earth tremble? Little Bai laughed dryly and scratched his head. He had really thought of that before. He felt that something that caught his eye shouldn't be so calm. No matter what, it should be something big. That's an ocean, not a river. If you want to see the waves, go to the East Sea of the Divine Land. There's no such place here. There's only a quiet river that has been flowing since ancient times. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him and calmly walked towards the source ice river. This was really a very ordinary river. However, it flowed at the edge of this world. It flowed past the most uninhabited places, and it flowed past places that were illuminated by starlight all year round. Very few people knew about it. She squatted down slightly and reached her hand into the source ice river. She could still see a small trace of the river water that was illuminated by starlight. She could feel the ice-cold river water flowing through her fingers. It even had the aura of the North Ice Realm. The Source Ice River in the far west was the water of the North Ice Realm. The Source Ice River in the far east was the water of the South Ice Realm. It's ice cold. It's actually the water of the North Ice Realm from a long time ago, said Yin Nuoxing. About a few thousand years ago, Little Bai counted with his fingers. This Source Ice River flowed so slowly, and it came from such a far place. Could it be tens of thousands of years ago? Or hundreds of thousands of years? Can this water still be drunk? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. The water of the Source Ice River flows once a year. Damn, this can't be real, right? The outermost region of the realm of the gods is so big, and it's done in a year? Little Bai almost fell into the water. What kind of joke was this? No, how did you know? And why is it a year? Yin Nuoxing fell silent. She awkwardly turned her head and placed her hands on her lower abdomen. She laughed dryly. I was bored back then. Then everyone let out a long oh. Elder Xian, he only followed suit. Little Bai, Lan Exen and the others clearly knew that this heavenly god would do many unimaginable things when he was bored. Just like this one. Who knew if he had sat here for a year to verify this matter? I was bored back then, so I threw an invisible object here. After waiting for a year, it returned to the same place. The soul attached to it didn't sense anything strange. It didn't enter the South Ice Realm or the North Ice Realm, so I knew it was a year. Yin Nuoxing scratched her face. This guy really sat here for a year. Lan Exen and the others looked as if they were about to collapse. Could it be that when the deities were bored, they were really bored to death? Also, you asked me why? How would I know? It's because this is the realm of the gods. Yin Nuoxing said confidently with her hands on her hips. Everyone fell silent. Because this was the realm of the gods, it was not surprising that anything could happen here. But there should be a limit to this. Looking at how slowly the river was flowing, it did not look like it could circle the edge of the realm of the gods once a year. But then again, the realm of the gods had so many illogical places compared to other normal worlds that they could reach the sea. Brother Nuoxing, there seems to be something over there. Lan Exen was sharply noticed something floating over from the upper reaches of the river. She couldn't help but be startled. She pulled Yin Nuoxing's hand and pointed in that direction. The group turned their gazes. Although there was a starry sky above their heads, the surroundings weren't dark. At this time, it was almost dusk outside the Godfall sky, so the light here was slightly yellow. However, the sky was still pitch black. They could clearly see something floating on the crystal-clear water upstream of the Origin Ice River. An ice block. Yin Nuoxing was startled. It seemed to be a block of ice. However, there seemed to be a broken arm inside. There's something inside. Little White narrowed her eyes. Everyone saw it and was shocked. It was a broken arm sealed in ice. It seemed to have floated out from the North Ice Realm. It didn't change back to its original form. It was just a human arm, and it seemed to belong to a human. Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly. She waved her hand, and a wave of energy came out. She lifted the ice block and threw it to the shore. Why is there such a thing in the Origin Ice River? It's even sealed in ice. Could it have floated over from the North Ice Realm? Little White's nose twitched, and he frowned. He smelled a stench. He quickly took the ice block from Yin Nuoxing's hand and smashed it with a slap. The arm fell out and released an extremely cold air. There were still remnants of energy circulating in it. Its aura wasn't weak. The owner of the broken arm should have been a high-level god when he was alive. Strange. Little White was stunned. He did smell something disgusting. However, after the arm fell out, there was no reaction. Little White, throw it away. Just as he was about to open it and study it, Yin Nuashing suddenly squinted her eyes and shouted. She slapped the broken arm and sent it flying. She clenched her hand, and 12 types of elements and several types of divine flames swarmed over and surrounded it. A mournful roar came from the broken arm that was wrapped in terrifying energy. It sounded like the screams of ghosts and the cries of vengeful spirits. It made everyone's hair stand on end and goosebumps appeared on their skin. The arm released traces of black aura, but it was purified into nothingness by the divine flames and 12 types of elements. Little Whites first stood on end. He lowered his head and looked at his hands that were holding that thing. He instantly felt disgusted. He quickly went to the Origin Ice River and rubbed his hands vigorously. He didn't forget to curse. What the hell is that? After the powerful energy purified the arm, there was nothing left. The black aura also floated and disappeared. The cries and howls were also gone. However, everyone couldn't help but shiver. They only felt that their bodies were a little cold. It was as though a ghost had touched them. The arm belongs to a human. However, there's a strong aura of the demon clan in it, Yin Nuashing said calmly. However, everyone was surprised when they heard this. I'm afraid that the owner of the broken arm fought with a demon clan expert. The arm might have been cut off by that demon clan expert. It was tainted with some of his aura. It shouldn't have been too long ago. It should have been done 3 to 4 months ago. However, would such a powerful demon clan expert appear in the divine world at this time? The person with the arm should be a high-level god, right? Lon Xiner and Mei Mao asked. Who knows? Yin Nuashing shrugged. There were indeed demon clan experts hiding in the divine world. However, logically speaking, they shouldn't be of such high status. However, he wasn't sure. Let's not care about this. Compared to this, I have to move faster. I feel that something is wrong every 2 to 3 days. When the Guardian Array is revived, there will be nothing to be afraid of, Yin Nuashing said in a deep voice. Chapter 1049. In the vast and boundless galaxy, endless light shone into every corner of the starry sky. There was a huge world floating quietly in the starry sky. Millions of stars were orbiting it rapidly from a great distance away. The huge object was like a giant beast, but it was not completely still. It was just floating very slowly in the starry sky. If one wanted to see it moving in the starry sky, they would have to accelerate time 100 billion times or more. Is this the starry sky outside the realm of the gods? Yin Nuashing and the others rushed out of the realm of the gods. The energy barrier was opened subconsciously, and their robes fluttered. The world behind them was so big, but the gravity did not affect them. The aura of the galaxy was completely surrounding them. Thousands of stars fell on them. Among other things, the former's body was brighter, like a small sun in the night sky. Lon Xin's curious eyes kept looking around. She compared the starry sky she saw with the one in the 5 elemental realms. However, she found that there was nothing different. If she had to say, it seemed that the starry sky of the 8 elemental realms was stronger. The power of the stars and the origin energy in the galaxy were very active. Those who were sensitive to the power of the stars could feel a slight vibration when their arms brushed past them. If we're talking about the realm of the gods, then it is the world behind us. Yin Nuashing turned around and waved her hand at the boundless world behind them. Looking at the realm of the gods from outside the starry sky, one would find that it had become somewhat transparent, like an illusion in the water. It was untouchable, and one could not see the end of it. Why did it become transparent? Whitey was stunned. That is the effect of the barrier in the realm of the gods. The barrier left behind by the god of destruction is much larger than the realm of the gods. After all, it was left behind in that era. After a few reincarnations, the realm of the gods has shrunk a lot. However, if you come out of the realm of the gods, you will see the realm of the gods as transparent, and we are still inside the barrier. As Yin Nuashing spoke, she took out the Book of Epics and glanced at it. I have used the Book of Epics to read it. This thing cannot be analyzed, but I can see the effect of the barrier. It is more exaggerated than the barrier of laws. The barrier of order involves the power of the origin factor. This thing can block all the senses of those who are not from the realm of the gods. All the beings in the 8 elemental realms will still remember the realm of the gods, but they will not be able to sense its existence. The closer they are to the realm of the gods, the 8 elemental realms. The realm, however, they will not be able to sense of the realm. What if someone was once from the realm of the gods, but came to live in the realm of the gods for a period of time? Little Ching asked. That would have to be traced back to the previous era. There is no example, but I can give you an answer. After coming to the realm of the gods, this world will imprint its mark on you. But this is only temporary. It is equivalent to a temporary pass. If you leave for a long time, you will still forget about the realm of the gods. Yin Washing turned around and said, as far as I know, there will occasionally be people in the realm of the gods who bring people back from the realm of the gods. However, I do not have a more specific understanding of what happened to those people. Perhaps some people left because they were not used to it, or perhaps they felt that it was a good place and decided to settle down. Even though the laws of the realm of the gods have been whittled away by this world over and over again, compared to the realm of the gods. Let me confirm it. As he spoke, his body lit up, and he drilled out of the energy barrier. The book of epics in his hand emitted a faint golden light. After a few seconds, he drilled back into the energy barrier. The light on his body dimmed, and he opened his eyes. He nodded and said, "That's right. Even when it is so weak, the laws of heaven and earth in the realm of the gods are still much stronger than those in the realm of the gods. However, it cannot be compared to the primeval age. During the primeval age, the difference between the laws of heaven and earth in the realm of the gods and the realm of the gods was like heaven and earth. After all, it was created by the first great deity. It is a specially made world." Lan Xir nodded. Yin Nuoxing looked at the starry sky outside and sighed deeply. Perhaps in 3 or 4 years, I will have to leave the realm of the gods and go to the realm of the gods. The realm of the gods? Where are you going? Little White crossed her arms and glanced at him. I'm not too sure. According to the old man's prophecy, I have to make a trip to the starry sky. As for where I am going and what I am going to do, I am really not very sure. However, on my journey to the starry sky, I will inevitably visit other planets with life. Perhaps I will even visit the Saint Spirit realm and Changyuan realm. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and smiled faintly. There's no need to rush. There's still some time left. I need to quickly deal with the matters in Pantheon. For example, right now, let's take a detour and go back. After circling around the realm of the gods for a while, they landed at the southern end of the extreme plain region. This place was close to the southern ice realm. The majestic glacier towered into the clouds. Even before entering the realm of the gods, they could see the majestic Tianmu Peak. It stretched high into the starry sky, almost piercing through the barrier. Yin Nuoxing felt that this ice mountain might be about the same height as the Pillar of Creation. In the realm of the gods, the 2 largest regions were the ice realms in the north and south. They covered the entire length of the extreme plain region. However, they were also the places with the least people. They were accompanied by wind and snow all year round. Speaking of which, Xian seemed to have said that he wanted to visit the Tianmu Peak. After entering the extreme plain region, Yin Nuoxing was slightly stunned. He turned his head to look at the southern ice world that was very close. That towering glacier that reached the clouds could no longer be seen. It was blocked by many huge icebergs that formed a continuous ice wall that spanned tens of millions of miles. It was very huge. Half of it was hidden in the snow clouds. 10,000 years of wind and snow could not see the sun. Speaking of icebergs, the southern ice world was thicker and grander than the northern ice world. It was majestic and grand. The northern ice world had a large snowfield. The disorderly arrangement of the icebergs had evolved into strange terrains. Brother Nuoxing, last time you said that you wanted to go to the southern ice realm. Lan Xiner opened her mouth and was stunned. She quickly waved her hand. She remembered that he said that he would not go for the time being. Nothing, I just mentioned it casually. You want to ask me why I want to go there? Yin Nuashing patted her head with his palm. He looked at the southern ice realm with his deep eyes and said faintly, "There's a secret hidden there. I did not have the time to go there back then. If I have the chance in this life, I will definitely go there." In the southwest region of the extreme plain region. A few days later, Yin Nuashing and the others arrived at a bustling city near the edge of the extreme plain region. They were slightly away from the location of the Pillar of Creation. However, it did not matter. They only came to this city to send Xiao Xian and the immortal ritual elder back to the clan. They also landed here to rest for a while. After a few days, the storm caused by the huge commotion that day had not yet subsided. It was still a hot topic for people to talk about. The higher the realm of the cultivators, the more they knew and the more they guessed. They talked about topics from all over the world, and there was a lot of discussion. Many people knew that those experts who could destroy the heavens and earth and destroy the sun, moon, and stars with a single hand were still alive in this world and had not passed away. The word God, which represented the peak of combat strength, appeared very frequently, and it affected the nerves of many people. Almost everyone who talked about it trembled slightly, and their faces were filled with reverence. Those were the most powerful existences in this world, and their strength was unimaginable. So, after a few days, there is no more news other than guessing that the aura of the god spirits has appeared in the Godfall sky. Some people speculate that there were two god spirit level masters fighting in the Godfall sky. That aura was enough to turn the heavens and the earth upside down. The mountains in the Godfall sky, and the part of the mountain range that was more than 10 feet high, all evaporated. Some time ago, some unknown powerful young masters appeared in various regions. It is said that they might be the disciples of the god spirits, or even the children of the god spirits. Those god spirit level characters were shocked by the huge phenomenon that day. They sent their disciples to investigate. The southeast region of the extreme plain region has been turned upside down. Who knows how many people have gathered there? Could that be the place where the phenomenon occurred? It is said that many high-intensity battles broke out there. Even some Underworld King-level masters were shocked when they saw it. What was that phenomenon? I don't know. I only heard that a powerful character might have fallen. There was a strange power in the Godfall sky that blocked all eyes. No one knew what happened there, and those who knew wouldn't say anything. The parts that were involved were known to those who were involved, or those who were behind the scenes. However, they didn't say anything, so only a few people knew the truth. In recent times, the god realm had indeed become much quieter, but this was only from a general perspective. Conflicts and battles of various sizes had always existed between different regions. Whether they were known or not, they would only cause a small amount of unrest. The storm would not be too big. Incidents like a single stone causing 1,000 ripples had not happened for some time. But recently, the godly land hasn't been peaceful. There was a big battle not long ago in the Phoenix Ridge of the Western region. It was said that it was caused by the disciples of the 9 sacred temples. They were all young people, but in the end, some of the great elders of the big sects were drawn out. That ancient land was almost sunk. You're talking about the incident that happened more than a month ago, right? It's said that the great tomb of a peerless character was found in the Phoenix Ridge. Some people even speculated that it might be the great tomb of the Phoenix of the 4 divine beasts. In the end, even the elders of the 9 divine temples were alerted. The battle that day, TSK, stained the sky with blood, mountains of corpses, and seas of blood. Who knows how many people died? Half of the mountain was dyed red with blood. Even an emperor god from an unknown power perished, killed by the aura of the great tomb. But it is said that something escaped from the Phoenix Ridge. Do you think it might be the eternal weapon that was buried in the great tomb that escaped? If that's the case, then anyone could have picked it up. Well, the probability is too low. Don't dream about it. In the restaurant, Yin Nuashing was stunned when he heard these words. But after thinking about it, since no one from the 9 sacred temples had contacted him, there should be no problem. so he didn't take it to heart. Tranquility. On the surface, it was indeed very tranquil. However, when the sea was tranquil, there were also surging undercurrents. These surging undercurrents would become earth-shattering waves. Even a sunny day would suddenly be struck by a thunderbolt, followed by a violent storm. Tranquility was all nonsense. It was just brewing the next storm. When the time came, all the winds and waves would roll together. At least, the signs of disaster have been appearing frequently recently. Not to mention some low-level practitioners, even high-level gods, might not be able to sense that something was wrong. Only a few people could sense it. Now that many of the younger generation have entered the small divine lands, the divine realm will be quiet for a while. Yes, the small divine lands is quite troublesome to communicate with the outside world. It is almost isolated from the outside world. I don't know what it is like inside now. It is said that the area of the small divine lands has expanded and some unknown changes have occurred. Huh? There could be changes in that place? Isn't it a place separated from the divine realm? Who knows? After tea and meal, Yin Nuoxing and the others left the restaurant. He turned to Xiao Xian and said, "It will be very safe for you to go back from here. There's also a large teleportation gate in this city. Our destination is slightly off, so after this, we will have to part ways." Xiao Xian looked at him reluctantly, then burrowed into his arms and rubbed against him. After a while, she took a step back and stared at him, saying, "Then be careful. The ones who should be careful are you." Yin Nuoxing smiled helplessly. He reached out and stroked her snow-white hair, saying, "The undercurrent is surging and is getting more and more turbulent in the dark." Yin Nuoxing said carefully, "I have left you many things. When the time comes, you can use that to find where I am. Don't think that the things inside are precious and throw them aside. There are many things that can be used for self-defense, enough to escape the attacks of gods. There's also a protective talisman inside. Wear it when you are free. It can speed up your cultivation and comprehension. Not only will it speed up your cultivation, but if you are in trouble, you can activate it. It can protect you for a long time. I will do my best to rush over." "Yes, yes." Xiao Xian nodded quickly, not feeling impatient at all. After talking for a while, she took Elder Xian and flew to the area where the teleportation gate was. The Cloud Fairy clan was not in this city. They had to go through the teleportation gate a few times to return to the clan. After watching them enter the teleportation gate and leave, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and flew toward the horizon with Lon, Exiner, and Little White. As for Little Qing, she had already taken Little Xian's egg and was resting in his spiritual world to recuperate. That battle had consumed a lot of her energy, so she needed to carefully recuperate for a while. This city was not too far away from the Zenith region's last 3 pillars of creation. In fact, when they returned to the Zenith region after making a detour through the starry sky, they could simply go and deal with the 3 pillars of creation. However, when he thought about how Elder Xian was still there, it would be troublesome to explain. However, circling back would be troublesome. After thinking about it, he still chose to make a detour. It was better for fewer people to know about the pillars of creation. In the underground maze of Xiaowang City, the pillars of creation had been exposed to everyone for the first time. However, there were not many people who had survived that time. Those who had seen the pillars of creation could now see the mysterious giant pillar at the end of the horizon. However, this number of people was not much of a problem. No matter how much they spread the news and made a ruckus, no one else could see it. Their spreading was equivalent to spreading the news in vain. On the contrary, Yin Nuoxing was not worried about this. "You have been a little calm recently." In the hidden location of the pillars of creation, Little White lay on the ground and said to Yin Nuoxing, who was repairing the pillars of creation. In order to save time, Yin Nuoxing did not fly over slowly. Instead, she directly tore through space and arrived in less than 10 minutes. "Calm." Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing was slightly taken aback. "What calm? I have always been very calm." No. In the past, you would stir up trouble every 2 or 3 days to shake up the entire God realm. After recovering your memories, you calm down. Now, the entire world is looking for you, but no one knows where you are. Little White shook its legs and said. Yin Nuashing turned around to look at him, then turned back to look at the pillars of creation. Her hands did not stop moving. In the past, it was all, oh, there was no other way. It was not like I wanted to cause such a big commotion. She paused and thought for a moment, then said, Your summary is not quite right. Those are all coincidences. It just so happens that I am not causing any big commotion at the moment. Isn't this quite good? It is peaceful and quiet. I do my own things and others do their own things. No one is bored enough to tease me and get beaten half to death by me. That's right. You have already activated cognitive blur and occasionally emitted that level of dangerous aura. Who will be tired of living and want to provoke you? Little White rolled her eyes. In the realm of the gods, he was probably the most dangerous person. Anyone who provoked him would be courting death or was tired of living. Very good, Yin Nuashing replied faintly, and once again focused on repairing the pillars of creation. In less than half an hour, the pillars of creation lit up one by one with the light of the elements. There were a total of 10 colors, no more, no less. When Yin Nuashing saw that it was done, she stretched her body and pushed back the large pile of formations that she had dragged out from the pillars of creation. She breathed a sigh of relief. I really want to sleep. He yawned and said, Then I will turn into a carefree, salted fish on the peak of a mountain, looking at the sun and sleeping every day. You're already a pig. Little White's cheeks twitched violently. That is the highest state that one can aspire to in life. After being busy for so long, it has been a little too peaceful recently. You are right, too peaceful. It is so peaceful that I want to rest. Yin Nuashing shrugged and admitted very straightforwardly. The 10 rays of light in the pillar of creation gradually dimmed. Yin Nuashing stood and looked at it for a while, nodded, and was about to turn around. Just as he turned around, from the corner of his eye, he saw that the 10 rays of light seemed to be slightly brighter, which made him slightly stunned. Hey, this thing is still shining. It didn't seem like this in the past. Little White pointed at the pillars of creation and reminded. In the past, only the golden runes would be left, waiting for the great guardian formation to be repaired. The light of the 10 elemental seals would gradually dim. Yin Nuashing also noticed it. She turned around doubtfully and reached out to pat the metal lump. Strange, this has never happened in the past. The 10 energy lines should be dimming very soon. But then she was stunned. The 10 elemental lights were getting brighter and brighter. Moreover, they were faintly releasing a wave of energy that flowed in the air. The 10 lights suddenly broke away from the pillars of creation and turned into 10 huge energy pillars. The light was getting brighter and brighter. Boom! A violent vibration sounded in the hidden place. Yin Nuashing was so shocked that she jumped back a distance. Her face was full of astonishment. The 10 elemental energy pillars pierced through the sky and pierced through the top of the pillars of creation. Then, like water snakes, they wrapped around the pillars of creation from a distance. They coiled around the pillars of creation like circles of spirals. The 10 colors spun slowly in front of them, dazzling them. The light of the 10 energy pillars that gradually streaked across their eyes shone on the 3 people's stunned faces. The pillars of creation also started to rumble and tremble. The layer of black metal on its surface gradually turned white. The entire body emitted a crystal-clear light. It was so white that it was almost pure. It reflected the light of the 10 energy pillars to every corner of the hidden place. It was so colorful that it could blind anyone's eyes. Oh my God! Yin Nuashing opened his mouth and uttered those words. His dumbfounded expression made Little White and Lon Hexer dumbfounded as well. Damn it, how many more things are going to happen in this world? That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.